Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, along with co-host Ivan Ozerets.
Hello.
196. We're going to call up Greg Moran. He's the author of the book, The Truth About Tennis. Veteran coach, award-winning writer, has written 3 books. Owner, along with his wife, Kelly, large indoor tennis club he's recently sold, still managing the club. Passionate about tennis. Let's give him a call. Here we go. Talking tennis.
Hello.
Greg Moran, thank you for being a guest on the GreatBase Tennis Podcast.
Hey, Greg.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Yes.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. At the table with Ivan Ozerets, the mastermind, the person who organizes the podcast, does all the hard work.
Yeah. Well, Ivan, you do a great job, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
With just saying, veteran coach, award-winning writer, 3 books. You and your wife have owned a tennis club, recently sold it. Let's go right where we start. Actually, I think usually we start with what type of baby food you ate. Where'd the passion for tennis? Where'd the passion?
That's a real long time. The baby food was a real long time ago, but the tennis I remember, pretty vividly. I grew up in Connecticut in a town called Weston, which is about an hour or so away from New York City, and my family was fortunate in that we were members of one of the local country clubs, and both my mother and father played, so they naturally wanted me and my sister to play as well. But this was, I guess, about 1969, before the tennis boom. So tennis wasn't really on my radar. I was much more of a basketball, baseball, and a little bit of football kid. Tennis wasn't cool back then, and of course, every kid wants to be cool. So the idea of playing tennis really wasn't particularly appealing. My parents kept offering it. I have to say, not pushing it, but they kept offering. And eventually I agreed to take a lesson from the club pro. And he was a young guy from Texas. His name was Rick Murray, who I think, Steve, you may know that name. My parents signed me up for a 30-minute lesson with Rick. And all I remember is that at the end of the 30 minutes, the lesson was over, and I didn't want it to be. Rick made it just so much fun that I begged my parents for another lesson, then another after that. And I think that really, goes to the point of how important the tennis pro is for igniting the interest in somebody. I had no idea who Stan Smith or Arthur Ashe or anybody was at that point, but the pro on the court, Rick, just lit the fire. And a couple lessons in, he saw that I was into it, and he asked me if I wanted to be his ball boy. And what that meant was that every day I would get dropped off at the club at 7:30. And I would walk around the court all day long, with my ball hopper, picking up balls for Rick during his lessons. And at the end of the day, Rick would hit with me for an hour or so, and he gave me a racket, and that was my payment. It was one of those Headmasters. If you remember that, Steve, Yvonne, you're way too young to remember that, I'm sure.
Was it the red one? The red one or the blue one?
The blue one first, and then the red one. I aspired to have the red one. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
And then eventually I got the red one. But I did that, for a couple of years and was a genuine court rat in between, would hit with anybody, anywhere, anytime. And I became a halfway decent player. And then Rick began to use me to demonstrate during his lessons. Now this is going to sound, seriously corny and hard to believe, but guys, I swear it is the honest to God truth. One day Rick was trying to teach a lady to volley, and she was struggling big time. So Rick said, "Greg, grab your racket." He stuck me at the net. He said, "Here, watch Greg do it." And he hit me a couple of balls, and thank God I hit the volleys in the center of the racket. And the lady just got this big smile on her face, and she said something to the effect of, "Now I get it." I swear to God, the honest to God truth. And at that moment, I knew I wanted to teach tennis. And I was probably, I want to say 13 years old, or maybe 14. And I'd also begun to write a little bit. So I kind of felt that if I could find a way to teach tennis and write about tennis, that would be great.
So the writing started early on. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it did. I did a lot of writing for the school newspaper, throughout high school, write about the tennis team. I started sending articles to Tennis Magazine and remember World Tennis Team. I'm sure you remember that.
Yeah.
And like every writer, I'm sorry.
I was going to say Gladys Heldman.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Started tennis at World Tennis. Yeah.
Yeah, long time ago. And like every writer, I had enough rejection letters to wallpaper a room, but I enjoyed doing it. And it was also during this time that I really became very fortunate again. My parents had gotten divorced a couple of years prior, and my mother married a British tennis pro named Stanley Matthews. And he'd won Junior Wimbledon, played Davis Cup for Great Britain. He actually beat Ilie Nastase at the French Open one year. And once Stan retired from the tour, Harry Hopman brought him over from England to Port Washington, which I think actually you'd spoken about Hopman on the most recent tennis, the Junior Development podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
And Stan came to Port Washington. We actually spent time working with McEnroe. And then Stan left Port Washington and became the tennis director of the club nearby in Connecticut that my mother was managing. So talk about the stars aligning. So they got married. So I was living in the house with a great tennis pro, and so I had two incredible, what's the word? I guess for mentors, examples in Rick first, and then Stan. So very, very fortunate there. As I moved through high school and was, still continuing to play a lot of tennis, Stan would let me, I don't want to say teach because I really didn't know enough to teach at that point, but Stan would let me, he would let me assist with some of the junior programs. And that kind of, just continued to feed kind of the, the interest that I had in working with people, working with players. Interesting. I really always enjoyed being on the court, coaching, teaching, more so than competing, which is kind of interesting. I went through high school. We had a good high school team. Went to Rollins College, which is a very strong Division II team back then. And I did a great job of warming the bench for 4 years. I was a solid bench warmer. And the best part of that time, in all honesty, was that I met my wife Kelly. And Kelly was from West Virginia, and she was one of the top junior players in the country for many, many years. And the women's team at Rollins, when we were there, played in Division I. So Kelly was, a big star on the Division I team, and that's where we met. And I continued to write, for the school newspaper about tennis, and that's where that all started. And then once we went through college, we came back to Connecticut, and I began teaching full time. And I guess from there you could say that over the next 40 years, I kind of climbed the ladder. I began as a staff pro, then I became a head pro, country club pro, tennis director, and ultimately I bought a club. And then actually 3-4 weeks ago, we sold the club. So now I'm kind of full circle, and that's one of the reasons we sold the club. Coming back full circle to being what I really want to do is be a tennis pro, just a tennis pro again.
Oh, it's a great story. So, is it two women in your life? Your mom, you said she was managing the club?
When my parents got divorced, my mother, got to work. She loved tennis, so she was managing the club. And it was a club in Norwalk, which is about, 15, 20 minutes away from where we lived. And then Stan came as he left Port Washington as the tennis director. And that's where they met. And, that's where it all began.
With Kelly, what was her background as far as did she play multiple number of sports? Did she start at a really early age? In other words, how'd she become so good?
She started, she's from West Virginia, and they brought a pro to West Virginia. His name was Skip Pillsbury. And they brought him to West Virginia with, the assignment to create nationally ranked players. And he did a great job. He really did. Kelly was, highly nationally ranked for many, many years. Ann White was from Kelly's hometown.
Okay.
And then Ann White went on, I'm sure you know that name, with she became very famous at Wimbledon with the white cat suit.
Right.
You remember?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and Kelly was on a, path to play pro tennis, and then, she went to college and met this guy, and that went off the rails.
With your passion for tennis, playing for 4 years, obviously you're very humble to, I think a lot of times the macho male ego, the older the man gets, the better he was. But just to be so open about, like kids today, I would say, you're going to get a lot of splinters. They have no idea what I mean, because a lot of tennis kids, they don't realize what it's like to be on a bench until they actually get to that level.
Right.
I think years ago, high school tennis, everybody played. I loved it when everybody played. Now, I'd say the individual's bigger than the program, and a lot of the homeschoolers, I think they should still take time to represent their local school and play for something bigger than themselves. But to stay I know many college coaches tell me that that's the toughest part of the job is to keep the players that are just outside of the lineup motivated and keep showing up for practice. How'd that go for you? Did you get
Mhm.
discouraged during those 4 years?
Not really, because I was quote unquote a high school star, and our teams always did well, won the state titles, all that stuff in Connecticut. We're
Right.
talking about Connecticut tennis, and our coach was basically a gym teacher that ran out to the court with 12 balls in a bag and kind of let us go do our thing, and yet he ended up in Sports Illustrated faces in the crowd because our team did so well. And then I went off to college, and yeah, it is. I just love to be on the court. It never really bothered me that much, quite honestly. And I was still really passionate about tennis. Always reading about tennis, still writing about tennis. To this day, the favorite person for me to play tennis with is my wife, Kelly. So it was never, and it's interesting when I give my lessons now and I talk about, certain things, I'll frequently say that, when I would play competitively, I would tend to get very nervous, which I did. I would get very, very nervous. And I think that's a good thing for students to hear, because they always put the tennis teacher up on a pedestal. Oh my God, you got nervous? Oh my God, I got so nervous I used to throw up, you know? And it's the truth. And I think, Steve, you get to a certain age where, quite honestly, the ego needs to, hopefully has been satisfied by now. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And, it's not about, yeah, I mean, you get, like I said, you get to a certain age and you kind of learn what life's about, and really what play tennis, should take in someone's life. And I have this conversation a lot with the people I teach, everybody, I operate, as I've told you, I operate in the world of recreational tennis, which I think is a different world than you guys are in. And I do believe it's a different skill set for the instructor. You have to know why the players are there, what part tennis plays in their life, and tailor your approach to teaching them accordingly.
Let me ask you about timetable. Your mid 60s. What year did you graduate from high school?
77, 1977.
77. So, um, I'm just a handful of years older than you, but I tell people I'm a product of the tiebreaker when tennis. So you're part of just like myself, you're part of the tennis boom. I mean, it was
Yes.
amazing how there was definitely a tennis craze in the 70s. It seemed like anybody and everybody was playing tennis.
Well, you know him much better than I ever did, but our mutual friend Vic Braden, everybody would buy the clothes and wear them in the supermarket. Very much so. And the tennis pro, was like your god. You looked up to. I mean, even when I first started and was there on the court with Rick, I mean, the best part of the day was being on the court with him, and then I get to have lunch with him, and having lunch with the local with the tennis pro is, you're there with a celebrity, and of course, he had the Lacoste shirt. Of course, I have to have all of that, and I have to use the racket he used, and that's why I really, truly feel that it's the pro on the court that generates the interest in the game. Because if I didn't have that first lesson with Rick, if I'd had a bad experience, who knows if I ever would have gone back? Because I wasn't dying to go there to begin with, but literally the first 10, 15 minutes, it was just, it was great. It was wonderful.
And Kelly, was she the same year? Did she graduate the same year as you?
Yep. She's the same year. So she graduated in 81 as well. And she actually, I came back to Connecticut. She moved back to West Virginia for a year. She was a special ed teacher. And then I was a year or so after that, I became the head pro at a local country club. And Kelly moved back up here with me. We were engaged, and she was my assistant, which was great because, the club's always, a husband-wife team are always a good mix because it's, something for everybody.
Did you? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask, did she play after Rollins at all?
No. She had the summer after she played. Remember they had a thing with National 21 Under circuit?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
She played that. So she played that circuit. She actually had some local business in West Virginia sponsored her, and they basically gave her a checkbook and let her do her thing. Fully trusting that she wouldn't abuse it, which she didn't. And one of the great things is we were engaged, and we had a National 21 Under tournament at our club that was to become our club, and then Kelly won the tournament. which was great.
And over the years, have you played any husband-wife tournaments?
No, nope, never really interested. We had our kids and we were, running the business and just, we like this. We still like to get out and hit. We get out and hit early in the morning, and life changes. And it's, I was also at that time teaching 12, 13 hours a day. So it's, back in the day, we would often hit early in the morning. I would teach my, 12 hours, every day, go to the gym on Sunday, totally overdid it, which is one of the privileges of youth, but we never really had any interest in doing any of that, the husband wife. So Kelly had enough of the competitive tennis, I think.
For our listeners, Greg is one who's listened to every podcast. I don't know how long or how short that list is, but thank you for listening to our podcast. My question with that, Bud Schultz, did you ever cross paths with Bud? He's from Connecticut. He's around the same age.
I don't think so, no. Yeah, no, I don't think I have. When you mentioned it, it rang a bell, but no, I don't think we've ever come across each other.
I played basketball at Babson Bates. I'm going to say Bates, Division III school, and then it's an amazing story. He never played a junior tournament, but he got to be, I think he was 39 in the world. I was at the first satellite that he won. A big 6'4" athlete, could serve and go forward. Tell us about the English family. Stanley Matthews Jr. He was a great tennis player, but then his father was a legendary football player. And I went back and read where the grandfather was a boxer.
Yeah. So, as I said, my parents, they were divorced. I would have been about 13. And then Stan came along when I was 15. And, as I said, he was the tennis director at the club my mother was working at. And, he was, as I said, everybody, the cool tennis pro. Well, Stan was the coolest, right? He had the mustache. He looked like John Newcomb. He had the great accent. He had the old Slazenger rackets that were custom made for him with his initials on the side. And he'd played Wimbledon. He'd won, the English version of Junior Wimbledon 3 times. Was the number 1 junior in the world. And, it was wonderful. And it was funny because when I started dating Kelly and I told her about Stan and Kelly told her mother back in West Virginia, her mother didn't believe it. She said, "Oh, Kelly, he's just giving you some kind of a line." And then I guess she went on, I guess they didn't have the internet back then, but she did a little bit of research and found out, about Stan and the lineage. And she said, "Oh my God, Greg, Kelly, he's telling the truth." So yeah, incredibly famous family. We didn't know, Sir Stanley Matthews. We had no idea, Americans didn't, where I didn't at least, know anything about soccer until, the first time we went to England. We went to England and we land and we're at the back of the line to get through customs. And all of a sudden somebody came up and recognized Stan and took us right to the head of the line and through we went. And, just the name Stanley Matthews in England is just, is royalty. Stan would tell. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to interject with a great line is behind every successful man, there's a surprise mother-in-law.
Well, that's a good one. That's a good one. But yeah, no, Stan would tell stories about his father. He said, I never saw an entire movie growing up because when he'd go to the movies with his father, they would always have to go into the movie 15 minutes after it started and leave 15 minutes before it ended because his father would just be mobbed.
Yeah, I think we Americans don't realize how popular soccer football is in England. And so obviously he's a rock star.
Yeah, Steve, when he passed away, I was at his funeral and they had the line of the funeral procession, and I was in the car just behind his body, and the procession began at the soccer stadium where he played quite a bit, and as the procession started to go down the road, it took a right into the stadium, and the stadium was packed with fans, and the car took a lap around the field, and standing ovation, and then we drove the 4 or 5 miles to the church, and I kid you not, every inch of that road was 3 or 4 deep, people hanging out of the window, crying, many of them crying because he was such a national hero to them. So I mean, think Babe Ruth, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and anybody else, and Sir Stan was that big.
Yeah, he got down here. He was the only player that was knighted while he was still a player.
Mm-hmm.
Born in 1915, father was a boxer. They called him the Wizard of the Dribble, the Magician. Played until he was 50.
Correct. Yeah. 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 And very, Stan will tell stories. Very fit. I mean, I don't remember the details, but vegetarian. I think before it was a thing. Fasting before it was a thing. Very, very. I think ahead of his time. In terms of his training and stuff like that. It's interesting, and I think you can relate this to tennis. People would say, well, could Stanley Matthews play in today's game? With the fields and the equipment and all that stuff. And many people will say, well, the better question is, could the stars of today play in Stanley Matthews' day with much worse conditions, much lesser equipment? It's kind of an interesting way to look at that. You can relate that to tennis too, I think.
Going back to his son, Stanley Matthews Jr., your stepdad, I read where he was taught by John Barrett, the famous commentator.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, he was just, Stan spoke about him a little bit. I guess he was, I guess they called it the Barrett Squad. And there was a group of English players. I can't remember who the others were. But yeah, they were a team, and they would do the, running in the sand in the army boots and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, no, Stan speaks, very fondly about that time.
Well, I growing up in ice hockey, I do think it's a problem in tennis. There's not enough appreciation for history. I think that's one reason of many that Tony Gotzik, along with Roger Federer, they set up the Laver Cup with. But yeah, John Barrett, he married Angela Mortimer. But she played doubles with Ann Shilcott, who Mark Spann is her son. I trained to teach tennis. It's just amazing the connections in tennis. I'm struggling with the pronunciation name. Mortimer. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm guessing Mortimer.
Yeah, I think you're much closer than I am. I think that might be 100% right. Yeah, but I wrote down, I think, 40 names that people you recognize in your latest book, and there's two of them. We'll get to that. You have to tell me who they are. Everybody else, if you're well read in tennis, you and I have had a lifetime in tennis. You can learn from everyone. Coming back to soccer, a lot of people don't stop and think. Like Nadal, for example, I tell people, he didn't really come from tennis information. He came from spirit. He came from athleticism. He came from soccer. His uncle Miguel, not Tony, but Miguel, he was on the Spanish team that won the World Cup. Tsitsipas, his uncle on his mother's side, his mother was a really good tennis player. And I'm going to guess 56. I have to get our fact checker on all this. But in 1956, the Soviets won the gold medal. So they're just born into athleticism. You certainly must have learned so much from Stanley Matthews, your stepfather, just on how to be an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, how to be an athlete, but again, more how to be a tennis professional, and the work ethic. Stan would be up at 5:30 in the morning, be on the court. He would teach all day. I mean, we taught many, many, many years side by side, and we'd be out there on the court next to each other for the 9th hour in a row, 10th hour in a row, and we kind of look at each other and jokingly say, tennis is our lives, But yeah, I mean, Stan was my coach, and he was, it's an interesting situation because, he was dating my mother at the time, so it's a different, dynamic of a relationship, the way he would relate to me, and but yeah, no, and I was again very, very fortunate to have Stan come into our lives, not only from a tennis standpoint, but also because my parents had gotten divorced and my father moved away, so he was also a big role model for me as well.
Right. Yeah,
and my sister.
Your sister, was she a tennis player as well?
Yep, she was she played as a kid growing up and played a little bit at University of Richmond, and now she's getting into pickleball apparently. So we'll have to talk about that with her.
Yeah, we can talk pickleball here for a minute. With going back to the Matthews boxing, that's another thing. Not only to people in the history of tennis, successful players, have a connection to soccer. They definitely have a connection to boxing. I mean, like Jimmy Connors, his uncle was a boxer, Agassi's
Mm-hmm.
father. People like
Mm-hmm.
Wozniacki and Sharapova. 3 different times I've hired boxers to train tennis players. That's a
Interesting.
whole different mindset. There's so many things about why do boxers have great footwork? The term,
Yeah.
like in tennis, we say shadow swing or jump rope. I mean, many times being down in Miami for the Orange Bowl, I would take players over to Tropical Park and ask permission to just have the tennis players. We'd go to this boxing gym, just watch the boxers work out.
Mm.
Let me do this for a second or two, maybe a minute or two. A mutual friend, we're going to pump your tires here. I called up Ed Weiss and asked him about Greg Moran. I married a gal named Moran. We had a strange and
Uh-huh.
wonderful relationship. I was strange and she was wonderful. Irish gal. You're married to an Irish gal. You always have the last 2 words. Yes, dear. But she's Irish.
Yeah.
Irish. She's not American Irish, but from Ireland.
Oh, wow. Wow.
But Ed, like yourself, is a writer. He wrote for our listeners. He wrote the book based on Willie Van Horn's work. We could talk a little bit about Norwalk tennis. Have you seen that? I'm sure being right there, you know what he's been doing with that program. I was up there one time to train the coaches. It's a nonprofit program. He's a high school coach, but he said that you're the early bird. He said you're up first thing in the morning. Said nonstop passion, love for tennis. Just great respect for great respect for the game. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, Ed is, it's great because Ed, Ed, as you know, is a very, very successful lawyer, and he always managed to get his tennis teaching in. He's devoted so much time to the program you mentioned, Norwalk Grassroots, and he's done just amazing things with them. And then a couple of years ago, he had started to back away from the law and wanted to spend more time teaching. And I've said to him many times, I said, "Oh, I wish I could have gotten you, 20 years ago when you could be on the court more." He's just, I mean, his passion for tennis, Steve, as you know, is just incredible. I mean, he is beyond professional, loves it. It's funny because we'll do a lot of, we'll do some workshops together where we're doing court rotations, and my job is to kind of manage that. So I'll be on the court, and it'll be 2 courts down, and it's time to do a rotation, and he's on one knee pulling out his notebook from his bag, going through something, and he screws up my time management.
Ed, he was a guest on our podcast.
Yeah.
He was a player. Where did he go? Swarthmore, right? They won the national championship. Then he went to Stanford. He's great passion for tennis. Was a guest in his house, and I know how many books he has. Clay court in the background.
Steve, I've seen him. He's come to our club on more than one occasion and stood on a court for 30 minutes doing nothing but practicing his service toss. Huh. Not even swinging the racket, just work. I mean, he is. I would have to say, I love tennis, and I know a fair amount about it. But a conversation with him is always educational. He just loves it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a great tennis mind. Yeah, he said, which I think is a compliment. He said you're a lifer, tennis lifer, always reading, always listening. Your club is a friendly atmosphere that you can tailor all your lessons to all different types of students, different levels. Have an all-encompassing program. Pride yourself on that your work has people become a member for life. Why don't you comment on that a little bit? Lifetime sport, lifetime member.
Yeah, I mean, we the club is called Four Seasons Racket Club, and it opened in 1976, and 15 minutes from Weston, Connecticut, where I grew up. And we were there. I was there when the doors opened, and Stan was actually the first couple of years. The club was built by a very wealthy man. He built it for his daughter, who was married to a tennis pro, and the club struggled for the first few years. Went through several managers, several pros, and they brought Stan in to run the tennis. He left the Norwalk Racket Club, which is where he met my mother. He became the tennis director at Four Seasons, and then they brought a fellow named Tim Marr in, and Tim's background was business. He was a Wall Street guy, but then he went to work at the West Side Tennis Club and was involved with the U.S. Open, and was involved with the U.S. Open when it moved to Flushing Meadow. So you had the combination of Sam, the great tennis guy, Tim, the great business guy, and when the two of them came together, that's when the club really began to to have its great success. So yes, so we've been there pretty much since it opened, and the great thing about that is kids that we started, 35 years ago, at age 5 or 6 or whatever, are now coming to the club with their children, and it's great, right? The next generation is always wonderful to see. But what's really satisfying for me is that the fact that these parents who we started so many years ago are now in their whatever 30s, 40s, and are still playing and are going to play for the rest of their life. And that's always been, my definition of success. I've always been much more interested in longevity than level. So if I can have somebody that started at age 5 and they're going to play tennis till they're 80, and the best they ever become is a 3-5 level player, to me that's a grand slam. Our oldest member is 93 years old.
That's fantastic. Wow. Yvonne, why don't you write that golden nugget down? Longevity versus level. That's a pearl. Go ahead.
It's funny, Steve, because the lady that's 90, I think she's 93, and her and her husband would come out to the club 3 days a week, and they'd hit for a little bit. And they had their 70th anniversary at our club, and her name was Ruth. I mean, wonderful lady. And she came to me one day, that's 93, and she wanted to take a lesson. And I said, Ruth, what would you like to work on? And she said, well, I need to get some more power on my forehand at 93. And her arms are probably, 2 inches around, if anything. So I'm hitting balls with her, and I'm throwing the kitchen sink at her. I'm trying everything I can come up with. And the power is just, really not coming. So I said, Ruth, maybe you should consider, some off-court training. And she looked at me, put her hands on her hips, and she said, Greg, I work out 3 days a week. I said, that's great. What are you doing? She said, I lift weights. And I said, Ruth, that's great. What exercise? And she's telling me and they're all great, tennis specific, et cetera. And I said, well, what kind of weight are you using? She goes, I work out with 2-pound dumbbells. And I said, well, maybe you might want to try to ramp that up to 3. And she said, well, she said, no, that would be very heavy for me. But, that's just an example of kind of a good example of like where my passion is. In particular, I think, Steve, you can relate to this as we've gotten older. I love to see older people that are still engaged, still interested. There's a guy at my club, and I won't mention his name, but he's very, very, very successful businessman. And he's now in his 80s. And great tennis player, but he's in his 80s, and it's caught up to him. So we were doing some lessons, and he said, I really want to play some senior tournaments, some 80-plus tournaments. So we were, on the court working, doing our thing. And I said, well, on when you have your first tournament, give me a call, come over, I'll warm you up. So he comes over, and I said, how you feeling? He goes, Greg, I'm so nervous. And I said, my God, I think that's incredible. I mean, to be 80, whatever he was, 82, and to still be that interested and so engaged in something that you're getting nervous. I mean, what's better than that,
With appreciating your book, how you said so many nice things about Vic Braden. Braden used to get people laughing. He said, yeah, at a 90 and over tournament, he once heard someone at the age of 90 go, to be 80 again.
Yes.
Another Bradenism is he would tell the 15-year-old, you got 75 years to get ready for the 90 and over division.
Yes. Yeah. I know how well you knew him, and I knew him a little bit. I just reached out to him arbitrarily at one point because I was writing a column for some internet website. And so I'm not going to, we became more than acquaintances, but I wouldn't say we were good friends. But he was wonderful. He wanted to, this is when Ray Benton was representing him, and he wanted to bring his tennis college to our club. So Ray came and we talked, and we, Vic was not inexpensive, deservedly so, but we wanted to see what he did. So they invited us down to, I want to say Naples. I think he was doing it in Naples. Yeah. And so we went down to Naples and met with Vic and went to the cocktail party that they did before the thing started. And on the first day, they had a few more people sign up. And so Vic said, Greg, would you come on the court and help me? And, my God, I told you how, growing up, the tennis teacher was my hero. So for me, the chance to get on the court with Vic Braden was just, my God, are you kidding me? And I meet him at the court, and he's out there carrying his baskets. And I said, no. Vic Braden's not carrying baskets to the court, right? So I took the baskets and, we went out there and, I helped him out for whatever it was, 2 hours. And, what a wonderfully nice man he was. He said, oh, Greg, nice job, Greg. You're a really good pro. And, I was out there with him for 2 hours, but just that he took the time to say that. I mean, that's something that, that's without question a career highlight for me. And then we did subsequently have him come to the club, and him and his wife, Melody, stayed at my parents' house, and we communicated quite a bit until he passed away.
Oh, it's great to reminisce about Vic Braden. I was in Naples. I was in Naples several times. I've spent so many years in Florida. And one time it was, Ray Benton was managing Jimmy Connors and managing the Nuveen tour.
Sure.
When Jimmy he played until he was 40, basically. So, shortly afterwards, they had the senior tour. And a lot of times when I would do a traveling clinic with Vic, he would stay it flipped. When he was younger, I would be inside doing the video. And then when he was older, he would stay inside and do the video, and I would go out to the classroom. But you know people in tennis. So one of the times at one of the facilities in Naples, so I was there a number of times, so people can't pinpoint this, but I knew the director of tennis was very critical of Vic Braden, and certainly a lot of people would be critical of someone with so much success. But it just means they maybe they couldn't find their way to the bathroom, or they haven't read his books, or. But that unfortunately, we know that happens. So I remember just telling Vic, I said, Vic, why don't you just say that the people would like to stay in here and ask questions, or be on one court where we can just troubleshoot. But those of you who just want to hit some balls, you can go with the director and his coaching staff. That just comes to my mind with, Gideon Ariel said to Jimmy, you use the word spastic, because Jimmy had blisters on the top of his feet. If people would watch how he would walk, he would drag his feet. And but actually Vic and Gideon helped Jimmy. His serve went from, they had him in the 70s hitting his serve. And Vic had the funny line. He goes, yeah, his serve goes 72, but his grunt goes 104 miles an hour. And, But Vic did have a copy of a letter written by Gloria Connors thanking Gideon and Vic for helping Jimmy with the serve. And there's always a positive and a negative, and positive. But Jimmy, it was just always great that he said, no, I play the way I was taught to play, his mother and his grandmother. But
yes, I would say anybody that has anything to say negative to say about Vic Braden never met him. Yeah, because he is just one of the nicest people I've ever met. And, I really thought he was great. I mean, I saw him on Hollywood Squares, and, he was the right guy at the right time, I think. In the article I wrote about him many years ago, I thought he was great because he's relatable to the everyday player. I mean, you could see Vic Braden, and how did he describe himself? A little short, fat guy that liked jelly donuts, right? He used to say that.
Yeah, he was the original Fat Albert. He was always a little disappointed that Bill Cosby got so much credit for the cartoon character Fat Albert, because Vic used to call himself Fat Albert.
Yeah. I mean, but you could see Vic on the court next to you in your Sunday morning doubles game, and I just loved it that he was, he's not trying to tell you how to win at Wimbledon, or he's, going to help you, win a couple matches in your 3-0 level league. And I always felt he was, the coach for the masses. And that's always been, that's why my book is called what it's called, because that's really always been, my passion, the club player, the recreational player.
Oh, we'll get into the recreational tennis. With Vic, remember Mike Carter was with me for 5 years, he's been with USTA forever. He said, this is amazing. They're intermediate players, but they look advanced, because, Vic would, one drill he had was, I want you to poach on every ball. Just as a drill. But I want to come back to Ed Weiss. He had 3 points, 3 questions he asked me to ask. I think this is a great one, where you obviously have been in the business a long time, and being in the club business, you had so many club pros work for you. He said that either you do it yourself, or you bring in a financial advisor to meet with your pros. So not only to deal with them, what they do on the court, off the court, but what they do as far as their thoughts on retirement. That was a point that he brought up. You want to comment on that? elaborate?
I try. I mean, I always felt, as I said, I'm a tennis pro at heart, and I always felt that a big part of my job as the director of tennis was to try to, give these guys a little bit of a vision that, like I said, I used to teach 12, 13 hours a day. That's not happening anymore, and you get a young pro. And one of the things that drives me nuts when I interview pros is I get, two questions. And when I get those two questions, the interview ends pretty quickly after. And the questions are how many hours will you give me? And how much will you pay me per hour? Um, I'm not a big fan of those questions. I don't feel it's, necessarily my job to give you hours. It's my job to expose you to people, but in a sense, we're all salesmen, you know. But I do feel a part of my job is to help these guys have a longer vision because, the life of a young tennis pro is great, right? You're young, you're out there in the sun, you've got a nice tan, you're getting, probably a very good hourly wage. People look up to you and you think it's never going to end. And we had a pro at my club and it was just a sad story. But one I think I'm sure you've seen many, many times, he didn't really plan for the future. His body did begin to give out. And it was just very sad because he's, putting his ball hoppers in the back of his car, driving anywhere he could to get a couple hours here and there. And it really, things like that make me very sad. So I've done some articles for, RSI magazine along the fact that, you are going to get older. You need to, try to think about that. Yeah, we've brought some people in to try to set up 401ks for our guys and talk to them about financial planning. Unfortunately, it frequently falls on deaf ears, which is, a difficult thing. That's really one of the things I'm hoping to do now that I sold my club is I'd like to do more writing, certainly spend more time on the court and try to do some things that, to help young pros, not just, on the court, but to have that longer vision because, look, I've had 3 knee surgeries. I had a major injection in my elbow 2 weeks ago. I've got arthritis in my back and, it's a lot of work to get out there on the court. So, we are all going to get older. And I just think it's important for these young guys to understand that and to try to plan as best they can.
Yeah, money. I mean, how's it go? You only make as much money as you save. With all the pros that you've worked with over the years, did you have an educational budget? Did you take a percentage of their lessons to help them with their pro development, their self development?
I told every pro that I have ever had, I have told that I would pay for their certifications and I would pay for any workshops that they wanted to take. I insisted a couple of years ago that they do, what was the first course, Steve? I'm embarrassed. I don't know the name of it. Was the GreatBase Initiative? Is that the 25-hour?
The one is Tennis Intelligence Applied.
Okay, I'm sorry. And I said, I need to see your certificate, before I'm going to let you on the court with the kids. It's just, it's a tricky thing because I think people are teaching tennis these days for some, I shouldn't say all, for a variety of reasons. Some are doing it because they can't do anything else. Others are doing it on their way to something else. And then, actually, I'm in good shape now because, about 3 years ago, I brought in, 4 new pros who are, quote unquote lifers. They're a little bit older. They're in it for the career and they love tennis. It was great because it was actually Ed was involved in this. We hired, 2 new pros and one day, it was a Wednesday afternoon, Ed and one of these other pros were up in my office arguing about the Continental grip, right? They're going back and forth about the Continental grip and they brought it up to me and I just started laughing. And well, what are you laughing at? I said, I can't tell you guys how wonderful it is to have 2 pros up here arguing about how to instruct, for God's sake. It's just to be that passionate about tennis. Oh, it was fantastic. But yeah, no, the pro education, is it something I should require? I tried a little bit. It's a tricky thing. My feeling is, the pros that are motivated and are in it are going to do it. A big mistake that I made early in my career, and I'm embarrassed to say this, and feel free to edit this out if you like, but I never went to a convention. I never went to a workshop. I never did any of those things. And it was a massive mistake on my part. My feeling just being that, I can't be away from my club. Now, I always self-educated myself. It's certainly easier now, online. But that was a mistake that I made. Forget not just the educational side of it, but also contacts that you meet and maybe opportunities that come up. So that's actually something I'm trying to begin to do more now that I'm at the tail end of my career. So yeah, I think to try to get the young pros educated, continuing to educate, and to have the vision for down the road, I think that's part of any tennis director's job.
No, that's well put. I'm certainly out of that now. I mean, but I was in the business. Uh, we ran a program called Tennis Tech, as you know, and at one point we would call it. I guess it would have been during the month of February. It's okay. The next 2 weeks is Resume Tech. It help people with their resumes and job placement. But yeah, you just never ever want to ask what you're going to be paid. I do think a lot of times people just fall into tennis. They didn't really have a plan to be in tennis. And then it's a means to an end. And they're I think a lot of times most of the time, an entry level tennis teacher, they make too much money. A lot of times they don't see the big picture, and then so many of my students got to the point where that's all they were doing. They thought they were making so much money, but they really didn't see the big picture. They didn't see the business side of it, learning what to do off the court. I think often when I'm talking about learning how to play tennis, Vic, following the boom of of tennis in the U.S. in the 70s, there was a boom in Germany in the 80s when Graf and Becker were both the best in the world, and so many students I trained worked for Vic in Europe, and many of them are still there. But the ones who didn't learn the language, they couldn't put a flyer together, they couldn't read a contract. The German word lustig, they would just liquid courage. They'd be drinking the German beer, and their tennis knowledge was schnell, schnell, schnell. I mean, with run, 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 and but no, the financial side of it. I'm glad we touched upon that. Another one he asked me, how many tennis balls have you fed? I think one thing with the GreatBase, the way we do it with a combination of systems, like our pros that we train can become lazy because we do a lot of. You don't have to be tied to a court and just feeding balls, and hitting balls. So that's one thing.
Was that an Ed question? How many balls have I fed?
Yeah, he said that you calculated that.
Well, he knows the answer because I did an article for RSI, and the article was about tennis pros.
I remember that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, as they get older, and in my opinion, when you're an older tennis pro, there are kind of three paths that you can take to stay, in the industry. One is if you've trained yourself, you can maybe shift to management, run a club, run programs, whatever. You can become, one of the online guys, and you're allowed to reach a lot of people with your, your secrets and all that stuff, which I think you and I both agree there are no such things, but that allows you to still make money, in the industry. But then you've got a whole group of guys, like me that still, the best part of my working day is being on the court. So the article was, if you're an older guy that likes to be on the court, and we talked about, I interviewed several doctors and came up with some kind of tricks that you can do to protect your body. But as I was writing the article, I calculated that I had fed, and this doesn't include, playing, because I played a lot of tennis, over 93 million balls.
Whoa.
Well, and when I turned the article in, the editor said, you probably know Peter Franciconi from RSI.
Just by name.
Super guy. Yeah, fantastic guy. And he, questioned the number, but then we did the math together. I had a lesson years ago where a lady came to the court and she was, not in a good mood. Something had happened before. And she said, Greg, I don't want to hear a word. I just want to hit for an hour. And I'd always wondered how many balls I hit. So I said, well, here we go. Now I'll count. And the number was, give or take about 1,000. So 1,000 balls an hour times whatever it was then, 10, 12 hours, times how many days a week, 7 days a week, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the number did come out to roughly 93 million. Wow. Where I'm struggling a little bit now is, for me, the way I like to teach, I do feel the feeding is important. because I feel the cadence and it sets the energy on the court. I do a lot of groups, 4-player, ladies clinics, men's clinics, workshops. So it's 4 players on a court with a pro. And again, this gets into the recreational part of it. I do feel a big part of it is, there has to be, I like the action, I like the action, and I love doing cardio tennis, right? I used to love to feed cardio tennis because it's quick, it's fast paced, it's a different animal. But to me, the feeding is an important part of it. And as I've been struggling with my arm, my wife will say, well, Greg, they're not out there for your feeding. They want to hear what you have to say, and, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure there's elements to that, but just the way that I like to do it, the feeding of the ball is important. So I'm learning some more tricks of the trade. I'm doing, some of the Spanish method. I'm doing some drop hitting. I've got my Steve Smith cones that I have people hit off of. So yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, I know. With a friend of mine set this up where I spent 3 days with Jimmy Everett. Julian Krinsky, who's been a guest on our podcast and done so much in tennis. Yeah. He did the same thing where when pros get older, but that they should have someone on the court who wants to be on the court, like what your wife said. You have a lifetime in tennis. They want to hear what you have to say. So, but yeah, I think very often the young coach doesn't take the role of the apprentice, where just like say a Jimmy Everett, when he was older, he would have somebody on the court with him. I want to go back to one thing. Everything reminds me of something. I'm of that age. I know you're young. You're a young whippersnapper, but you're getting close. But to actually be on the court and not hit balls. There's a famous story about, I believe it was John Austin who won. It was either Jeff or John, Tracy's brothers. She had 3 brothers. They're all really good players, but 2 played on the circuit. They all played either Division I tennis or pro tennis. So Robert Lansdorf didn't say one thing for the lesson. And like your mom, Jean Austin, she ran the pro shop. She was a manager at the Jack Kramer Tennis Club. And Robert Lansdorf didn't say one thing during the lesson. And Mrs. Austin said, Robert, she was there to take some notes, and said, you didn't say one thing. What was the lesson? He goes, that was the lesson. Last time he took a lesson, he didn't listen to me. So I didn't say, I gave him the entire lesson where he didn't say one word. But Gary Alpert, one of our students, he's still, he must have 40 years in the game now. He was in Miami, and he's teaching the famous Robert Haas, who wrote the book Eat to Win.
Of course,
and
sure.
He used to give him, I don't know if it was daily, but he would give him a 2-hour lesson several times a week. And Haas told him, Dr. Haas told him, don't say one word. I just want to hit balls. But what comes to my mind is a little bit of a laugh, is that Lendl, who spent a lot of time in Connecticut, as you know, he was a big fan of the Eat to Win diet, Robert Haas. And they asked McEnroe, are you on the Eat to Win diet? Are you on the Haas diet? He said, I'm on the Haagen-Dazs diet.
Well, Steve, it's funny when you say that about Haas, because another thing I did a while back is, again, in the world of, I don't know how you feel about this, but in the world of, recreational tennis, people, they come to the court for different reasons. And in this article, I talked about 3 different types of students that I have. The first was he was a brain surgeon, world famous brain surgeon. And I'm out there hitting balls with him. And after, a couple of minutes, I bring him up to, try to impart whatever wisdom I had at age 24. And as I'm talking to him, I can just see his eyes are glazing over. He's looking around, he's looking here. And I was not that, I got a little bit flustered. So I went back, hit some more balls. A few minutes later, I pull him back up. And it took me a little while to realize he had no interest in what I had to say. He just wanted to run and sweat and get the stress of his job out of his system. So I recognized that. And I just ran him around like crazy. I'd throw out some tips just so I felt like I was doing something. And he took, 2 lessons a week from me for probably 8 years. So in the article, I called him the exerciser. And that's why he came to the court. Second one was a lady. And she comes to the court. She walks on the court, and we meet at the net. You do the meet and greet. And she always extended the meet and greet. Oh, Greg, do you have kids? How are your kids? How's your wife? How's, et cetera, et cetera. So we're talking a little bit, and we go to hit some balls, and a couple minutes later, she goes to take off her jacket, and I've learned eventually that was my signal to go up there. And then I got to hear about her husband and her kids for, a few minutes. So by the end of the hour, we'd probably hit whatever, 35, 40 minutes of actual tennis. But again, she got what she wanted and she took, lessons for a long time. Third one is in the article is the stereotypical student, right? And her name was Joyce. She came to the court dripping wet. She was sweating. There was no, how's everybody? It was, she pulled out her notes. This is what I want to work on. And that's what we did for the entire hour. So the point of the article, and it was for a Teaching Pro magazine, is that, people come to the court for different reasons. And, you have to, within reason, right, you need to recognize that and to a certain extent give them what they want.
What was the name of the second student? We have the exerciser, the stereotypical student, and the second one was?
You had the exerciser, you had the socializer, and you had the student. And then what I also talked about is when you're putting together groups. I mean, God forbid you put together a group of exercisers and socializers, right? That's not going to work. Or, you know what I mean? So, and everybody, look, the reality of it is everybody is a little bit of each. But that's the art of the instructor in the recreational world to recognize that. And, Steve, you often say on the podcast, the only kind of business is repeat business. But, there is an element of truth to that.
Oh, for sure. Coming back to another three, you mentioned a senior pro. They can work towards management. They can become an online coach. And what was the third one?
Or they can be me, still out there on the court.
Yeah, okay.
tearing their body apart and icing their whatever, and getting injections every few months, and trying to, I've been on a lifelong quest, Steve, to ask tennis pros, what do you do that allows you? Because I want to be on the court. I said to, what's funny? You maybe hear this too, Steve. As a tennis pro gets a little bit older, I get this question all the time: are you still teaching? Well, of course I'm still teaching. It's like the goal should be to not have to teach anymore. Well, I don't get that. I mean, of course I'm still teaching. That's what I like to do. And we had a very old family friend over a couple of weeks ago, and she said, "Are you still teaching?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "My goal is to be able to teach into my 70s." And she says, "Well, you're almost there."
No, that's great. I want to go back to a couple of points here. Daniel Coyle, in his book, he has several: The Little Book of Talent, Talent Code, and then Cultural Code. He may have more. He has a website, and I agree with him so much on the point that people in sport and maybe other endeavors, but obviously that's the world I'm in and you're in, should hire 60 and 70-year-olds. You need to find a way to make it work. But I find that people get to be a certain age, they're not going to be in the final three. They're not going to get the nod to be hired. The thing about online guys, this is just for like people like yourself who, I was asked just recently, do I study Jeff Lewis? So I know some people are already laughing when they hear that. I've known Jeff since he was 14. People should look up. I don't know if you've seen his name on the internet with Tennis Education, but he does an excellent job. I think I've known Jeff since he was 14 or 15 years old. And then I had a fundraiser. Gentleman wants to help us with fundraising. Asked me if I'd get Ryan Reedy's endorsement. Ryan Reedy is also. I spent time not nearly as much as Jeff Lewis by a long ways, but I spent time with Ryan when he was a teenager. They're both outliers. They've both been teaching tennis since they're teenagers. They're both outstanding. But a couple things. To me, the online tennis teaching, we're doing that, but we're not doing that. I'm really opposed to, and I understand, like, we have this program called Daily Monitoring Program, and we had students doing it, and we pulled it off because it was free. We pulled it off the internet during COVID, and now we're just like everybody else. We're so busy. We want to go back, and we want it to have it work with the older players. We're inspiring the younger players. But to me, I think like a Dennis Vandermeer, you can manage from the court. To me, it's a red flag. I wouldn't want to hire someone who doesn't want to be on the court. If they're a tennis teacher and go, well, and I'm telling you, you know as well as I do, there's so many people who don't want to be on the court. And it's actually a privilege to teach. It's I do understand. We've talked about Doug Cash's what he used to say years ago, Doug Cash, who was with Tennis Corporation of America for a long, long time, and now he runs cash flows. I'm repeating myself from a previous podcast, but 55 hours a week, a day and a half off, and there has to be a breakdown. So maybe it's 35 hours a week and 20. But if you leave the court, you leave the court. And, Rocky won, pretender, contender. And so many people, to me, it's like, I think it's just like playing matches. If you stop teaching, you stop teaching. And another thing too, is I've coached so many people that started coaching college tennis. And I said, you need to always teach beginners. Have your camp be as important as your team. Because if you stop teaching beginners, you stop teaching. And it's like, imagine if someone was a reading teacher and say, oh, I only work with advanced readers. I mean, we should have tournaments on teaching beginners with, but one other thing I want to come back to is the art of feeding. It is an art, and I think that, whether it's hand feeding, it's doing double hits, or, and then doing some research for this podcast, there's, maybe there's more, but I didn't see that many clips, but I know you can hit the tennis ball. I mean, I saw you doing some doubles drills on YouTube. But that's a skill in itself. I think it's so important. This is where tennis really struggles, where in junior tennis, the hot shot, the prima donna, they don't want to hit with someone that's not at their level. And they don't even really know their level. But I'm always telling the older players, they're hitting, like, let's say a 12-year-old hitting with a 9-year-old. And I just go up and I just will say, if they miss, it's your fault. I mean, you just need to be able to put that ball on a dime. I mean, Welby Van Horn, he would just get upset if you weren't feeding, right into the player's strike zone, feeding with rhythm, feeding tempo. And Vic Braden, the way he used to feather the ball, he did what we call rapid fire, the Braden feed. It was very, very good for group dynamics. What's the name of the woman who is it Krause, who's in charge of cardio tennis?
Michelle, yes, of course.
Yeah, so one time she was at our tennis school, and I was in Tampa for 15 years, and she was very nice. And, I'd seen her at conferences and such, and she said, well, Steve, I know you're working with tournament players, and tournament players don't feed the ball very fast, or, it's not a matter of the speed of the ball, just the frequency, pumping out balls.
Right.
But with the Braden feed, years ago, there's the Miha ball machines, and in all these tennis schools in Germany, they all had Miha ball machines. And it's like, no, you could stand right at the net post and grab 3 balls, boom, boom. And we have a young player visiting here today. He plays 3 instruments, and one is the drum. And I said, Yvonne, I said, that's how, I said, I'm not a drummer, but that's how you do the Vic Braden feed. But when Vic would feed, he would use that rapid fire feed. And, he had baskets designed that came right up to chest level. So the player didn't have to bend, and so he was ahead of time, knowing coaches didn't need to be out there bending every time. And the way you would feed, the basket would be in front of you, protecting you, and you would feed, and you wouldn't take your eyes off the student. You'd be just looking straight ahead. I mean, the baskets, you used to have the sweepers, and there were, in all 4 corners of the court, you could just sweep the balls into the basket, and then you just pick the basket up, and the basket sat on the table. He had thought out every little detail, but he would feather the ball because he used to say forever. I mean, right towards the end of his life, where he started studying the brain so much, his number one tennis tip throughout most of his life was players don't get the racket hit below the ball. So he feeds the ball where it, you feed with underspin and you just feather it, and the trajectory is what makes the ball bounce high. Welby was fantastic as well. He would have people, he could do it off his racket, but, if someone was skilled enough, you can toss and you tell somebody, okay, hit the ball in 3 bounces, hit the ball in 2 bounces. And you just call out the number, and then they really have to make all these adjustment steps. But, but feeding and I think a lot of times, so many people, they just want to work with advanced players, and all they're doing is just cranking out, they're just stand by the basket and they just crank forehands and so many things to be said about feeding. We tell people that are, junior tennis players, if they're only on the court with a pro, they won't be any good. They have to be practicing on their own. They can't just be with a pro. But for junior players, they should feed the same way they're going to hit. But we have kids come here, and we have them feed one another, and it's a right-hander, and they don't even put the basket on their left hip. So you just know instantly the kid's never fed a tennis ball.
Exactly. Yep.
But I think there should be a station on practice where kids are taught how to feed. So, okay, we're going to drop hit feeds in the alley, and But any comments you want to make on feeding, or we can move on. But that's.
Well, to me, it to a large degree, it sets the tone, or for me, I should say, for me, and you can, how do I want to say this? It's easier to make the player successful, right? If you want to put it right in the right spot. If you have somebody that's perhaps a little bit cocky, you can make them a little bit unsuccessful and bring them back down to earth. If they're struggling, you can easily pump them up. So it's a definite skill, and for me, it's a big part of the overall experience of the lesson.
No, I think giving playing lessons too. Playing lessons where, you can talk after every point, or you could talk at the end of a set, and then also too, we have a couple families that want to hire sparring partners, and that comes back to a sparring partner should be mentored by a veteran coach like yourself. But that sparring partner should be able to, play different ways. Can't think of the gentleman. He was at our tennis school one time. He was for a long time with Serena as a hitting partner, a German, but he can lube it, so he was at our place training for a week with Serena. She was just there because she was selling jewelry on the Tampa, what is the shopping network? It's based in Tampa.
QVC.
Yeah. So, but this guy could play, he could mimic other players on the tour, how they would play.
What a skill that is, right?
But just goes, okay, I'm going to loop the ball. I'm going to hit underspin. And, now that's another whole conversation, is that there's not that many styles. But I would say this, though, even the people that are making a living online, is that to really have people have the true experience is that you have to be on court. And I know a lot of people I've trained. Just recently, someone asked me to, write up something for them to, be in the video business, be in the remote tennis teaching business. And it's like, come on, find people right in your backyard, find people at your club. To make tennis grow, it's not a matter of, finding somebody on the other side of the world or across the country that can give you their credit card, and then you really masquerade yourself as a expert. That's where. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but in your book, you have a great line where plagiarism is wisdom, and something originality, stupidity is originality, or if it's original, it's stupid. Yeah, how's that go?
I wish it was my quote, but I stole it, and I give him credit. All wisdom is plagiarized, only stupidity is original.
Say that again.
All wisdom is plagiarized, only stupidity is original. I think that's how it goes. I don't have the book.
I've got to go back to that, but something that's a pearl for me. For our listeners, is that I want to own that. So I make it a story. Yeah, I read Greg Moran's book, The Truth About Tennis, and I just love this because I think what so many people are doing, I know Andy Fitzgerald did maybe 500 Instagram videos, and people, and it's great to share, but when people would just bootleg those videos that he would make, and people would know it, but they would miss some of the key points. Instead of just sharing what Andy put out, who spent a lifetime with Vic Braden, they would just, point your phone at me, and then they would put it out as their own Instagram post. And
in my, Steve, you go back to the online video stuff. I just think, and this is one of the reasons I wrote the book, I just think there's way too much stuff out there, and I think I think people just go down the wrong path in terms of their, approach to hitting the ball and their approach to strategy. It's also, I have this conversation a lot. Back in the day, people would take lessons from one pro, right? You had your pro, that's who you trained with, and you did your tennis, you improved along the path, you had your tennis journey, and it was fun. Today, I've got people that take lessons from 4, 5, 6 different pros. And I had the conversation. I was talking to a lady just yesterday, and she said, well, and this is a 3.5, 4.0 level lady. And she said, well, different pros see different things, and, et cetera, et cetera. And I said to her, our games are not like a scientific experiment where you need to put together a think tank. Strokes are strokes and fundamentals are fundamentals. And in my opinion, what happens is when, people take lessons from a lot of different pros, A, they could get conflicting information. B, different pros prioritize different things at different times, right? So what ends up happening is the player ends up working on a little bit of everything, but there's not really any deep learning taking place.
Yeah, the shopping and bopping with Emma, how do you pronounce her name? Emma Raducanu?
Raducanu. Yeah, English girl.
Yeah, so Andy Fitzell is coaching Diana Schneider on the tour. They're in, I think, Madrid or the week before in Barcelona. And they had a practice session with Emma. I mean, she hits the ball so well. I mean, I think there's certainly some things that, target-wise or tactic-wise. But that was her father. I read and I've asked many British coaches. We've fortunately, I've teased that we said, we had a war to get rid of you guys. But we've had a lot of English coaches come and hang out with us here recently. And what's the story with Emma? There's so many coaches, but the dad, that was the dad's philosophy. I read that as well, is that, well, maybe this guy will help with the forehand and this guy will help with the backhand. And I think that's where we can come back to recreational tennis and competitive tennis. Certainly they're packaged and they're different in so many ways, but at the same time, a grip is a grip, a forehand's a forehand. But yeah, go ahead.
No, and you're talking about a professional player. I'm talking about a 45-year-old woman who's trying to learn the game. She doesn't, like I said, you don't need a think tank. Pick a pro you like and stick with it for a while, and well, as you say, I think you have a great line. It's don't judge the unfinished product. Give it a chance.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Give it a year. Coming back to Vic, his club player in his number one book, his first book was Bertha Finkenbaum. When you're teaching Bertha Finkenbaum, but Vic's thing is, hey, people want to hit balls, and you do at the end of a lesson. I think the 3 E's. I mean, you don't need to give a dissertation. I think we have if you've listened to all our podcasts, we have the list of 20 pros, the 20 different type pros.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's people that they're just giving their dissertation lesson after lesson. It's like, let's hit some balls. Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was just going. Video is very important, but to me, if someone is a video class, and you're a owner paying the overhead of an indoor club, and it's just precious court time, especially in Connecticut where you have the weather that you have, and the coach is sitting on the bench with their phone, the kids looking at this small screen. And so there's a place for video, but to me, the video should be done off the court. You could quickly do it. I'm not totally opposed to it, but I do think many times the pros are just being lazy. They'd rather just talk than feed balls. They'd rather look at video than feed balls. So you got to get out there and it's physical, and you got to. And there's ways for the pro not to make it physical, but at the end of a lesson, the 3 E's. I mean, and we know that a lot of times you have to camouflage education. Where it's okay, is there exercises and there's enjoyment. Coming back to Ed, besides feeding, he told me I needed to ask you about doubles. Why don't we talk a little bit about doubles?
Sure.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind with doubles?
Down the middle, at the feet, and over the head. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. I'll rephrase that, and I'll steal a quote from our friend Vic, and I use this all the time. He said this to me. He said, "The better a player gets, the simpler their approach to the game has to become." And if I say that once a day, I must say it 50 times a day. And why? Why is that? Because and I say to my players as I'm going through this, what happens as you get better? The game gets faster. So, that's where it gets down to, most of your points in high level doubles are one hitting down the middle, at the feet, and over the head. And I'm a big fan of John Wooden, right? Steve, you know who that is. Yvonne, you may not know John Wooden?
I've been learning about him here.
Yes.
For a while.
Yeah, and then the rumor was that he was coaching UCLA, and UCLA would come down the floor, and they would only run three offensive plays. They would set up. The opponents knew exactly what was coming, but they couldn't stop them because they executed too well. So how does that translate to doubles? Down the middle, at the feet, over the head is where the vast majority of your points are won in high level doubles. That's what I feel. I always talk about the little I call them the little low fat ladies and men down in Florida who kind of plop around the court and hit their little angles and their little alley shots and all this kind of stuff. And I say, well, those are great because they have 45 minutes to hit the ball, right? But when the game gets faster, those kind of shots aren't going to be available. Those openings in the court aren't going to be there. And see, this is an interesting thing that I talk about quite a bit. I think the game. I steal your line all the time. Is I'm going to coach you the way to play the game the way the game is played at the level we're trying to get to, right? So I've got a group of 3-0 level players, and they're young and they're athletic, and I'm making them come to the net. We're doing all kinds of drills where they have to come in, and the ball's going between them. It's going over them. They're running into each other. They're giving me one dirty look after another. And finally, I pulled them all up to the net, and I said, ladies, when I think about what we're going to do in the clinic, I don't say, what can I do that's going to screw up your tennis? I want you to succeed. Everything I tell you works. You just can't do it yet, and that's why we're here.
Yeah. No, that's true with Vic. I mean, there's a line where if you're playing someone who has a trick fibula, they're moving east and the wind is blowing 30 miles an hour. This is the shot.
Yeah.
This is a shot you have to use. And no, the simplification is sophistication with
exactly. Yeah.
I think with the one up, one back, players at the recreational level running the triangle where the net player, the ball's on the opposing side. So the net player moves in, they're trying to poach, so they move in on a diagonal, and then the ball goes past them, and then they move back and they plug up the middle. So they're conceding the outside of the court. Certainly, live by your sword, live by the sword, die by the sword. I mean, Vic used to say, Steve, with principles, you're going to, you live by your principles, you die by your principles. Is that no, serve and go. But a mistake that we make is, okay, kids, you're playing against people, play one up, one back. Let's play some one up, one back ourselves. Let's work on this, on countering against the one up, one back. So on one of your YouTube clips, you say it so well. There's 3 ways to play: 2 at the net, 2 back, 1 up, 1 back. And of course, Vic would say the worst way to play is 1 up, 1 back. Most universally played is 1 up, 1 back. But then they're playing 1 up, 1 back, and there are all the circumstances. You're working with. I'm sure you worked with so many kids that just playing once a week, or a group of ladies. They have one team practice and one team match, and that's all they're doing. They just play twice a week, and so that really becomes an art form for us. Going back to. You've said so many things. Could just go back and make it a course where a young pro should not be meeting with someone like yourself who owns a club and has all this experience on the court, and they're thinking about how many hours can I have and how much am I going to be paid per hour. But the set of circumstances I've been in for some time is people send me students, and it's just a completely different animal where it's not that so much as advanced tennis or competitive tennis. It's just tennis immersion. Like, okay, these people are coming in for a week, 3 weeks, and we're going to work with them. They're most of them are homeschooled, or they're on spring break, and we are going to have 8-hour days. We're going to go back and forth to the court. But with doubles, it's now in men's college tennis. I would say it's 2 out of 3 teams are playing 1 up, 1 back.
Yeah, I've heard you say that. Yeah.
I was at a Battle of Boca. I think it's famous in American tennis now. Every weekend in Boca Raton, it's a great service. There's a UTR tournament, and Ivan, you would know Yuznov,
Mikhail Yuzhny.
Mikhail Yuzhny. Yuzhny. So he's on his cell phone. He's made a few $1 million. He's a great player. And there's 4 people playing. They're all staying back. All 4 players are staying back. And it's just amazing. Like the people you would see at the Battle of Boca. I mean, Chris Everett's over sitting on a bench watching a match, and nobody even knows who she is. I mean, she's
Yeah.
keeping a really low profile. All these well-known coaches come back and forth. And that's, I mean, one thing to be a name coach, a lot of times a name coach is they're promoting their name, or they're looking to be that third base coach. They're looking to coach the kid who's already played. And the sad thing is that people don't even play doubles because very few teams are playing doubles. The draws are so small. When you and I were younger, the doubles didn't cost much more money. Maybe it was enough to cover the tennis balls. And when you went to a tournament, you definitely played singles and doubles.
Right. Well, I think you said it so well. You say it all the time with the one up, one back. It's superior athletes playing an inferior system.
Yeah. But with Dave Secker's been on our podcast a couple of times at the last year. This team, along with his head coach Simon Earnshaw, they got to the finals, and they were trying to they try to serve and come in on the second ball because they're getting kids that they've been playing tennis at least 10 years, age 8 to 18, and they show up and they have 10 years of experience playing one up, one back. Mm-hmm. We had a podcast with Sophia Patel where it was counterintelligence, where she played at UNC. UNC's playing NC State, and the coach just allowed her to say, "Hey, this is how we need to do it. We're going to both stay back." And they were just, it's only played to 6 in college tennis, and they're just ripping returns up the line, and they just, because they pretty much knew. It's interesting that Sophia grew up with us, so she knew basically what Dave Secker was saying is, okay, we're gonna go forward. We're gonna dictate play at the net. But what else on doubles comes to your mind? Up the middle, middle solves the riddle.
Yeah, that's we hear that one a lot, right? Yeah. No, but when I work with my doubles players, I use that line a lot. We're going to work on the game the way it's played at the level we want to get to. But I'll also, preface that if I'm working with a group of, 3-0 level ladies and they have a USTA match tomorrow, they're not going to win with both players at the net because, the skills aren't there yet. So I said, if this is, the way you're most comfortable playing, play this way now. But when you come to see me, we're going to work on, trying to get to that next level. And it's an interesting thing because I try to really stress to people that the game changes, dramatically as you get better. And it's unfortunate because I think players develop a lot of bad habits because things work at the 3-0 level, right? Like there's a lot of openings on the court, and you can get away with hitting the ball, 6 feet over the net to a net player because the 3-0 level player often doesn't have the skills to do anything with that. So the 3-0 level player will hit a weak ball 6 feet over the net, and the player will butcher the volley, and the player at the baseline thinks they did something well. But I said, no, that's going to, at the next level, that's going to, you're going to have a tough time. It's funny, a funny story. I had a lady years ago and, we're doing the drills, playing the points, and, she's doing a lot of things, quote unquote wrong, but she's winning the points. And I'll say things to her like, well, that's a great shot, but, at the next level, you might need to. So I must have said that 3 or 4 times. And she looked at me and she said, well, Greg, what's wrong with this level? And I said, well, nothing, and she stayed at the same level for, 25, 30 years. But I try to get it, I tell the people, look, we're not out here to play at this level. I'm assuming we want to try to get better. So, it's also a good thing, I think, to always, put into their minds that they are going to get better and they can get better. And this is the way the game is played at the level we want to get to. So that kind of helps when they get frustrated a little bit.
For years, we've run a program called Train Like a Junior, and we let adults, just do what the competitive juniors are doing as far as, being filmed and making changes in their game. And I can recall many players who say, well, if I keep doing this, I'm going to run out of people to play. There's, like, say, in a large club like yours, you don't have that many 5-5 players. And then it works to say, going this way, there's more 3-5s than there are 5-5s.
And for sure.
But I just thought that was interesting. I don't really want to improve so much. I won't have anybody to play with. The Alta League and This is before cell phones and even before the internet. I mean, it was as big as any telephone book, like the telephone book of Los Angeles, the telephone book of Miami. Atlanta
Yeah.
itself is a big place, but it's just all these, beautiful, sprawling suburbia, beautiful suburban neighborhood courts. And I can remember, okay, you really want to win, you put your racket in the pizza position and you just toss and tap. You use a forehand grip. You want to use a semi-Western grip. You just put your racket right in the tray position, toss, tap the ball in the box.
Yep.
Never, ever go to the net. Say if you have two righties, you put one on the left side of the court and then one on the center mark on the baseline. And you say, all you do is just lob.
Yep.
And, that's really Shepherd me taking the role of the spoiler. No, I think it was senior tennis as well. Is that, I mean, there are differences. Bill Jacobson did so much with CompuTennis. Once a player is over the age of 14, and then once they're over the age of 55, that's what his data was, is that's where tennis becomes more, at a competitive level, becomes more defensive. And it's just Arthur Ashe, who's 33 years old, said, I didn't learn to lob till I was 33, and that's where he had that big win against Jimmy Connors at Wimbledon in '75.
Mm-hmm.
But most juniors, they can't hit the high defensive lob because they have a semi or a full Western grip, and they can only hit a topspin lob. And it's like every time they're trying to hit a winning lob instead of just get the person off the net, let them let him hit
exactly.
a weak overhead and then transition. How about all your years at your club as far as getting juniors to interact with adults as far as playing doubles?
Rarely. I mean, that's, going back to what I said at the start. I mean, when I would hit with anybody, I was, and I'm sure, you guys were as well. If I was the fourth for ladies doubles, I would hit with anybody. It rarely happens. It's a challenging thing to get the kids onto the court more than during their lesson. We have our, what we call our competitive program. And these are the kids that, they want to make, a lot of the kids are coming once a week, and it's one of several activities, right? Tennis on Monday, piano on Tuesday, golf on Wednesday, et cetera, et cetera. Once a junior shows a little bit more interest, we then, try to steer them towards our competitive program, where they have a 2-hour instructional class once a week. They have a complimentary practice session, 90-minute practice session, and they have free use of the court whenever they like. With Steve, indoor court time is expensive. So that's a huge bonus to the program. Complimentary walk-on court time. The kids all receive a list of everybody in the program that has that same privilege, and it is rarely taken advantage of. And the pros try to perpetuate that on the court. We're on the court. Hey, Billy, why don't you get together with Johnny on Saturday and try to, practice a little bit? I mean, it just rarely happens, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, Joel Trucker, a great tennis mind, said on our podcast, the club directory should be the junior development program. In other words, you can just call people up and play. But that's something that's gone away with. How about at your club, the breakdown between groups and privates? How does that work?
I would say I've noticed a real shift in that since COVID. I don't know if it has anything to do with it or not. We are a huge private lesson taking club. People take a tremendous amount of private lessons. And we have a big junior program as well. We keep our ratio, 4-to-1 with the clinic, but there's just a tremendous amount of private lessons. And there is that perception out there. And I've heard, your thoughts on it too on the podcast, is that, you need I met with a pro yesterday, and he was telling a pro came for an interview. He said, well, you really can't learn during a group lesson. I immediately thought of, some of the videos of your stuff I've seen, and I had to smile. He said, no, you have to have a private lesson to get any real improvement, which, we don't agree with that, obviously. But I think people take private lessons for many reasons. It's scheduled to their convenience. They have all the pros' attention. They hit all the balls. They're not worried about if they're, I get a lot of phone calls from parents. I want little Billy to be the weakest player on the court. I want him to always play up. And I try to explain that's fine, but when little Billy's playing up, somebody else's child is playing down. And I always have in my mind on one of your videos, you've got the 5-year-old, hitting off the cone, and right next to you, you've got the 18-year-old national champion doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's people take a lot of private lessons, which Doug Cash will tell you is not what you want. You want the group because from a revenue standpoint, you're making more money doing that. But I think it's again, in the recreational world, people are coming to their lessons for different things. Sometimes the private lesson person just wants to come and hit balls and get the workout and socialize a little bit with the pro. Sometimes the group lesson people, perfect example. I've got a group. It really depends on what people want out of their tennis. I've got a group of ladies that come every Monday morning, 10:30 to 12. They don't practice. They go out to lunch after. It's just a way to get together. They could not tell you what USTA stood for, if you gave them $1 million. And so the way that lesson is designed from me, it's a lot. It's not instruction intensive. It's like keep them moving. It's a lot of fun, a lot of joking. The next group after that is the USTA group 4.0. They made the finals last year. Very focused, very into improving. So I think it really depends on what people are looking for from their tennis. And a lot of people prefer the one-on-one to the group dynamic.
It's great input. With your book, I have the 3 C's. I know, having gone through it, read it, it's complete, it's common sense, it's clean. With reading the book is going to help players at all levels. So it's not, I would say it's not, just for recreational players. I think it's for anybody who wants to learn more about the game of tennis.
Well, thank you. I have to tell you, in one of the other books I did, and it drove me absolutely nuts. Somebody wrote a review on Amazon, and it said, well, this is great for 3-5 level players and below. No, the information is the information. I have a guy that, and he's a good player. He's a 65-year-old guy, phenomenal shape. And he's, he read through the book and he's, well, there's so much information. What do I look at first? How do I improve? And, and I said to him, the information, there's nothing new. We've said this before, there's no secret. And he's doing, quote unquote, pretty much everything right, like in terms of his shot selection. And I said, you're doing the right things. Now you just have to do the right things better. So everybody's so eager for new information as opposed to digging down. One lady said to me the other day, I think I need a few more tools. I said, no, you're doing it all. It's all good. You just need to continue to make it better. When you come to the net and your first volley lands, a foot behind the service line, it's the right shot, but you've got to make it land, 2 feet inside the baseline or whatever. So it's, instead of digging down and looking for and putting the work in to improve what you're doing, people are looking for the secret or the shortcut. So yeah, I'm totally with you, Steve. It's, a forehand's a forehand, tennis is tennis, and facts and the court's the rectangle, swing long.
With so many different stories. How's it go? Say nothing, criticism. Say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. If you want to avoid criticism. So certainly our work is not our work. It's homework. It's, we haven't reinvented the wheel. And I do think that's a major problem with internet education, the YouTube guru. So one of the students, sometimes the hand you fed comes back to bite you. And one of our former players who did quite well, college tennis, pro tennis, said, well, you guys have 80% of it right, but you need to get the other 20% from me. And with Andy Fitzell and comments coming back through social media, it was done and it was all accepted. It was done in a friendly manner. So, but we contacted the former player and Andy goes, well, I've got 3 video screens. I've got 3 matches of you playing, and this is somebody that we had raised money and taken to Braden, and been filmed, and so it's, and you start talking about doing high speed film and how someone hits a tennis ball. But granted, you can learn from everybody, but I do think that, and this has come up so many times in our podcast, that the celebrity coach, the confidant, the mentor, they definitely have a role. Like I really respect Brad Gilbert, but Joe Public thinks that, they're reinventing how these players play. That's not really the case.
Right.
But with your book, maybe you've already answered this, but country club lesson versus a USTA lesson.
Yeah. I mean, I'll frequently, jokingly say that to people because I gave the country club lesson for many, many years. And the country club lesson basically is, we tell you how wonderful you are. My God, your forehand looks fantastic. Is that a new hairstyle? Is that a new outfit? You're doing great. Yes, you've hit the ball off the grip 5 times, but you're getting there. It's getting better, right? And the USTA lesson is, we tell it to you like it is. And that's what I said in the introduction. This book is the USTA lesson. It'll, tell it to you like it is. I call it the truth about tennis. And I think that's one of the good things about, getting older. It's the truth, as I see it. And it goes back, Steve, to when people are saying, like I said before, people taking lessons from so many different pros. And I'll say that. I said, look, people are taking lessons from 4 different pros. Every one of us thinks what we say is right, including myself, and I just say, what I suggest is just try everything. If there's something I say that doesn't make sense, come tell me. But yeah, so it's also a part of getting a little older too. And I think you're probably a little better at this than I am is, you tell it like it is. And, if your forehand stinks, your forehand stinks, right? Now, would never say it quite like that. But, yeah, that's the difference between a country club lesson and a USTA lesson.
Well, with that, we have a captive audience too, where people will, get on an airplane, they come in, they check into a hotel, and someone's told them, you need to go to rebuild your forehand or rebuild your backhand. Going back to Jeff Lewis, great guy, loves the game. His story's been told. He put some workshops together. It was really the first time where I was with Vic, where we're in the same room and I had a speaking part. I was smart enough when I was with Vic as I needed to listen. But Vic, he absolutely loved we would make these take home tapes. And so it's just like, okay, let's document what the flaws are. Let's skill test. Let's feed 25 balls. We can do it as a tiebreaker. We can do it as a set. We feed balls. Okay, spin your serve in. If your serve goes in, so at a certain level, if your serve goes in and bounces 4 feet up the back fence, and then you can rocket the feeds. I always say like a Mr. Hopman or a Robert Lansdorp. And so, yeah, it's, we have people that are just committed towards playing college tennis for the most part. But at the same time, people come to see us, they can be complete beginners, and it's not a problem. We can, like you said earlier, we can work with an 18-year-old who's won national titles and work with a 5-year-old all at the same time. You have to have some courts to spread out, and you have to, it's like a lot of tennis players, it'd be great if you could start in the gym, end at the gym, or start on the track, end at the track. But the country club lesson with Jiwan Maharaj, great guy, great tennis player. I'm sure he played Stanley Matthews Jr., your stepfather. He played at that same era. And when I started working at this place in Tampa, the Hillsborough Community College, Jiwan was there. And at one time I had worked for Jiwan, All American Sports. So I was given the contract to run the courts, and he was grandfathered in, and he hit the ball so well. He was still a junior. He said, why don't you just go sit on the bench and watch a G1 hit? But he was working with club players, and he was so positive. I mean, you're not going to, I don't really see, you have a group of club players come out, and I'm not being chauvinistic or sexist. The men, the macho male ego, they're not even taking lessons. But the women are there, and, they're like a group of 45, 50-year-olds or older. My son, Connor, has a great sense of humor. He'd just walk up that sidewalk and go, we got the wrong coach. Listen to that guy. That's it. That's it. You got it. Nicely done. But and he could make everybody look so good because he could just put the ball right on a dime. And so there's, I do say at times where, you should treat the adults like kids and the kids like adults. But the only place I've seen it where, and I've traveled quite a bit, was when I first got off an airplane in Japan. I looked out the window walking, into the airport, the terminal, and the crew that came out to work on the airfield, they're all wearing like, whatever color suits, and they're ready for manual labor, moving luggage or whatever they were doing. But they all were in a circle doing jumping jacks and doing exercises. And I'm going, whoa.
Wow.
And
Wow.
adult tennis in Japan, I've made this mistake where I've done so much work with coaches and juniors, but over the years, I've done my fair share of working with adult players. So I remember one time just going, all right, just jog a couple laps and we'll stretch. And the adult players just stopped and looked at me, because adult players, typically they don't get on a court and jog and stretch. So it's definitely different. Well,
Steve, it's funny you said that, the macho men. I've got a group of guys that, and matter of fact, they come every Saturday, and they're 4.0 plus level players. So they're good players, a couple of ex-college players, and you got to kind of break them down a little bit, because they're trying to hit the big shots, et cetera, et cetera. So a few weeks back, I brought them to the net, and I said, guys, it doesn't matter how good any of us ever were. We all wrap back around to being recreational players. And this one guy said to me, he goes, well, I'm not a recreational player. And I said, politely, I'm trying to be a little bit of a country club, guy. I said, well, yeah, you are. So he's going back and forth. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, you get paid to play, or are you paying to be here today? And he goes, well, I'm paying to be here. I said, well, then, you're a recreational player. And I said, now you're a serious recreational player. And that seemed to make him happy. But I think, with the guys like that, one of the things is, you try to have a little bit of perspective. And, again, in my world, which is a recreational world, I'll frequently say, when somebody's getting upset or whatever, I say, guys, let's have some fun. This is supposed to be fun. If this isn't fun, what are we doing? And, with that in mind, the approach to teaching them the game, is very percentage based. I frequently say to people, and I do to a certain extent believe this, I think the best tennis out there in the recreational tennis world is 4.0 level ladies, doubles and above. And if you watch their rallies, they're very long, they're very strategic. The advantage shifts 2 or 3 times, and the point usually ends with somebody hitting a good shot, as opposed to somebody making a stupid error. So with the people that I work with, I say, you're starting to get it, so to speak, when you notice that your rallies become longer. And then it's much more fun, too. It's much more fun. It's a better workout. And in the recreational world, yes, everybody wants to win their whatever, but it's got to be fun, right?
Oh, 100% but that's one thing on the junior side where, they say want to be great tennis players, and there's a break and they go to their shoulder bag and they're on their cell phone. I took 3 years of Latin. My mother was very easygoing, but she wanted her children to take Latin. It was supposed to help me out academically. I guess it didn't work because I just read the hockey news. But the word recreation, to recreate, the exercise of the so many positives. You've been in the classroom and you go out and the human spirit and fitness and air through your lungs and there's so many things. I think the language. Here's something that I had never heard before, but we call it emergency shots from our work with Peter Burwash. But I love it how you called it awkward shots. What a great way to define that. Why don't you just comment on some of the awkward shots?
I think I probably stole that from Peter Burwash, Steve, quite honestly, and just changed the word so I could pretend it was mine.
I think actually, in all honesty, for club players though, I think it's much better. I mean, to say this is an awkward shot. We play this drill called mini tennis 5. We got, there's more than 5, but here are 5 basic ways to play mini tennis. And one, Peter Burwash would teach beginners. He'd have them stand backwards, their back to the net.
Yes.
And have a continental grip, and Bud Collins calling it the Bucharest backfire. But that's certainly I tell juniors I don't want to have anybody run back. And, they put 2 hands on the racket. They have no idea to hit the Bucharest backfire, the shot over their shoulders. But no, I think that it just sums it up so well because that it is just that for many players. I mean, an awkward shot.
Steve, you know what my best tip is? I tell people the tip that's going to go on my tennis tombstone is hit up, swing up, because in the world of recreational tennis, it's what I see. I would even say 4.0 level, but 3.5 level or below. I don't know if I want to say the majority of, but a lot of the shots are awkward shots, right? Because the players are late preparing, they're late getting into position. 9 times out of 10, they're on top of the ball, so it's like Cirque du Soleil tennis. And I always tell people, I said, when you're out of position, either relative to the court or the ball, people tend to tense up or they get stubborn and try to blast away, and the ball goes in the net. Just hit up, just get this thing back over the net. And again, in the world of recreational tennis, a lot of times just getting the ball back is going to do pretty well for you.
Well, what is competitive tennis? I mean, Welby Van Horn, 95% of people play at tennis. I mean, most of the people in our world, they think they're competitive. They're not really even competitive with their work ethic, their fitness level, but they think they're competitive just because their parents are taking them to lots of tournaments and they're investing so much money. But throughout your book, I mean, logic just jumps out. Why don't you comment on this? When to add power?
I always tell people I didn't really want to write that chapter because, I tell people in, however many years of teaching tennis, I have never said to anybody today, we're going to work on power, because I think that power evolves, as technique improves, right? Like my wife's the perfect example. She was, 5'2", and she had, think Chris Everett stroke, that kind of efficiency, right? I love, whoever said that there's no right or wrong way. I heard that, was that you guys? There's no right or wrong way. Well, probably not. But somebody said there's no right or wrong way to hold or swing the racket. There's efficient and there's less efficient. And that's kind of the way
that's Braden.
Okay. And I think that's true in terms of strokes and strategy. So, when you would watch Kelly hit a tennis ball, like I said, 5'2", small, but the Chris Everett strokes and the great athleticism, she was hitting the ball harder than most men. So, what I try to focus on as much as I can is, getting as the technique improves, the power will come. And one of the things it's funny, I'll pull a group I had my advanced men a couple weeks ago, and I pull these guys to the net, and we have about 16 of them, and I've got, 3 pros out there with me. And I said to one of them, I said, all right, guys, tell me at what point during what I'm going to say, the guys start rolling their eyes. And I said, all right, guys, what we're going to work on, we're going to talk a little bit about, 2 most important elements of any shot, in my opinion, are preparation. What are the 2 most important elements of preparation? The proper ready position and the split step. I feel those are, 2 things that are just, totally misstretched in my world.
Could you repeat that? The 2 things?
The 2 most,
yeah,
the 2 most important. Well, I think the most important element of any shot initially is preparation, and the 2 most important elements of preparation are a proper ready position and the split step. And I feel a lot of that.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel a lot of that from you guys. Center, the racket center, the elbows up a little bit, which is great because for many years I was telling people, be compact, elbows in, and then what you said, when the racket then comes back, the racket face opens, and that's something I've learned from you guys. But the point being, if the racket's in the right position, all it becomes is a shoulder turn, right? A full shoulder turn for a ground stroke, left for a volley. And I try to explain to these guys, as the game gets faster, you need to have this efficiency. And this is a mistake that I have made, and I think a lot of pros make, is that we don't stress the ready position and the split step enough when players are starting because, well, A, it's not particularly exciting to work on, but B, they don't have to do it, right? You don't need to hold your racket up. You can hold your racket down below your waist and not split step as a beginner because the ball's coming so slowly and it's not coming back that often, that you have all day to get over there and do whatever you're going to do. And as a result, they develop very bad habits. And all of a sudden, the ball starts coming quicker, right? And now at a 3-5-4 level, I'm stressing, center of the racket, split step, and it's not a habit, and they really have a tough time getting it. So to me, that's where it begins, right? A solid ready position, a proper split step, turn the shoulders, get, efficiency, and then the power will come, I believe.
With so many takeaways, I know Yvonne's writing down takeaways, golden nuggets for the treasure chest. Just the other day on Facebook, and for 15 years we've been putting stuff on Facebook, GreatBase Tennis Facebook. And there's 2 sisters help out, and then there's 2 boys on the other side, and they're playing with spec rackets, which is a great tool as far as a bridge sport, where pickleball doesn't really It's not, if someone's just whacking balls, wiffle balls with an oversized ping pong paddle, it's not going to turn into tennis. But anyway, the spec racket, it has some positives, because if you're playing spec tennis, it's going to help you with your tennis skills. But Yvonne told me that one of the comments on the social media, and we don't really at this point, we haven't in the past. I know Andy Fitzell certainly got tired of people asking the same question. It's almost like criticism never gets past the follow through on the forehand side, where people are mistaking the recovery as a follow through. But a gentleman wrote in and said, no, you don't turn on the volley, you set your hand. And there's certainly times on an awkward shot, emergency shot, that's all you have time for, just a reflex volley, set the hand. I think it was either Chet or Bill Murphy in one of their books, the two brothers this goes back before Braden and Vandermeer in that era, that there's the drag volley, the snap volley, the drag, the snap, the reflex, the cup, all these different things that you have to do with a ball when you volley. It's not everyone. It's just going to be a perfect ball right to you where you're hitting the same type of volley. But if you set your hand and then you turn your shoulders, your swing is going to be too big. So typically the club player or the entry level player, I mean, those are just labels. The neophyte, someone who's been playing for a long time, they certainly almost have a sixth sense on what to do to improvise and to adjust. How about styles and strategies? What do you comment on that a little bit?
Well, I'm going to backtrack one second if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
What you were just saying.
Yeah.
What you were just saying. I was teaching a guy, and this is the top of mind. I was teaching an older guy a couple of weeks ago, and he's trying to hit his forehand, and he said, "Greg, I've got to come over the ball. I've got to come over the ball. That's what I see on TV. I said, "No, there's no coming over the ball, right?" So I put my racket over the ball. I said, "If you come over the ball, what's it going to do? Come up through the strings?" And he goes, "No, I've got to read my wristband and show my elbow and all that kind of stuff." And then this is something I've learned from you to really make a good distinction between the follow through and the finish. And that's something that's helped my players, dramatically. So this guy's fighting with me about, no, I've got to come over the ball. I said, no, your racket face has to be, the strings don't lie. The ball's going to go where your strings are pointing at the moment of impact, et cetera, et cetera. So he's fighting with me left and right. And we finished the lesson. And he signs up for a lesson, which shocked me because it didn't go well. For our personalities didn't quite match. But anyway, between the first and second lesson, I went online and I just Googled, professional tennis players racket at the moment of impact. Okay. And I had, whoever, Federer, Djokovic, even with the funky grip. And you saw how the strings are positioned at the moment of impact, right? We know how it's supposed to be. And I went back to Chris Everett's era. I went back to Billie Jean King, back, all the way back to Bill Tilden. And I had pictures of every one of these guys at the moment of impact, exactly how the strings need to be facing to illustrate that, there is no coming over the ball. The racket face must be, in the proper position, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a big thing that I go through with people because a lot of teaching pros are, start low, finish high, rush over the ball, read your wristband, show me your elbow. And I tell people, and again, this is stuff I've learned from you guys. I said, by the time you're reading your wristband, the ball's long gone. It's, 11 feet away by the time the brain registers, 7 to 11 feet away by the time the brain registers the impact. So I've yet to figure out what reading the wristband has to do with where the ball goes,
Yeah.
So that's just, some of the many, many great things I've gotten from you guys.
With, strategies, styles, strike zones, there's this logic throughout your whole book. Why don't you comment a little bit on strike zones?
I think it's, I'll say to people, there's no shot in tennis that you don't want to move forward into that I can think of, so that gets back to, we did a workshop a few years ago. It was called Tennis IQ. And to me, basically tennis IQ, I sum up in one word, and the word is awareness, right? In the first week, we talked about ball awareness. Where is the ball relative to your body? And that's where we get in the strike zone. And I'll just say different pros have different numbers. I saw some, internet guru had 6 different strike zones. I think if I was to kind of, sum up the way I feel tennis should be played, it's simplify everything. So for me, you have 3 strike zones: court to knees, knees to chest. Anything above the chest is, I would call that strike zone 3. And I think most players are comfortable, somewhere in strike zone 2. So what we would have them do is we would be feeding them balls and have them call out 1, 2, 3, just to be aware, of where they're taking the ball. If they're consistently taking the ball in strike zone 3, well, maybe the opponent's hitting great shots, or maybe you're not moving your feet as well as you could. So the first week we talked about, strike zones and ball awareness. The second week we talked about court awareness, and that's, where are you positioned in the court? And this is all going to impact the way you approach your shot. So if I'm 15 feet behind the baseline and I've got the ball up above my shoulders, well, if I have some tennis awareness, I'm going to play that shot a little differently than I'm going to play a ball around the service line, right in strike zone 2. And the purpose being, to get them to become aware of that, because so often I'll have players 3 feet behind the baseline with their leg up around their neck, trying to hit the cover off the ball, And I frequently say to people, I think the 3 worst phrases in the history of tennis are racket head speed, go for it, and I can do it, right? And I'll say to somebody, you say to somebody, have you ever heard the term racket head speed? Oh, yes, I know what racket head speed is. I said, well, forget you ever heard it, because the minute you tell that to somebody, what do? They start trying to swing harder. And then they swing harder, everything tenses up, the stroke goes down the tube. Yes, of course, you need racket head speed, but you don't get it by swinging harder. And then, go for it, right? I'm 9 feet behind the baseline. The ball's around my ear, but I can do it, and I'm going to go for it. Well, no, you can't do it, and you shouldn't go for it, So that's trying to get them to be more aware. And the third week, we talk about the other side of the net. And one of the things, guys, that people say to me, and I say it drives me nuts, is the USTA ladies will come and they'll say, oh, my God, she hit every ball down my alley. She angled this off. She did this. She did that, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm saying, well, what are you doing that's allowing them to do that, right? If you're consistently giving players balls in the middle of the court in strike zone, well, of course they're going to do that. If they're consistently hitting down your alley and you're not shifting over to cover your alley like you should, well, of course they're going to do that. So my thing is to try to get people, I think when people say that, and I have a chapter in the book on excuses, I think when people are telling me how wonderful their opponents are, it's like they're absolving themselves of any responsibility. If I'm playing you, Steve, I can only do what you guys allow me to do. And I think that's a good way. I think that's a good way for players to become more aware. And I like them to look at their tennis that way. What am I doing that's allowing their opponent to do what they're doing?
No, I love how you use the word awareness over and over again. We always tell people, okay, this video analysis, 3 things: awareness, acceptance, commitment. Another thing I like is how you break things down to 3. I mean, chocolate, strawberry, vanilla. I mean, no one's going to memorize the 28 flavors at Baskin Robbins.
Right.
For us, the 3 parts of a tennis player, from the neck up, from the hips down. But when people come to see us, first impressions are everlasting. We spend so much time with the middle part, what they're doing from the neck to the hips, because of the grips, the shape of the swings. But no, just in listening to you, it's so refreshing because of buzzwords and phraseology. That's where, obviously you've been in a situation where you have a multiple number of teachers, coaches, the pro staff, and it could be someone who has the least amount of experience that says something like that really registers. I've seen, I've watched a lot of kids teach tennis. We're big on kids teaching kids. We use Don Leary's word picture method. Like, I didn't come up with T-Rex. I didn't come up with alligator arms. I didn't come up with, I mentioned Gary Alpert earlier. It was his son. He goes, well, it's like you're at the zoo and just trying to get someone to keep the ball in their hand as long as possible. Don't let go of the toss till shoulder level. Just pretend you're at the zoo feeding a giraffe piece of bread. So yeah, that's the art form, is to, try to say it where it registers. And that's where I think, that's where, I think one takeaway for me again is the continental grip, where the 2 coaches, or was it Ed Weiss and senior moment, Ed Crass, one-on-one doubles. Love that guy too. But Ed Weiss, where the 2, I mean, that's a takeaway for me, that because what we do is we almost we put the arguments out because the Bradenism, dimensions of court, physical laws dictate what happened to a tennis ball. No coach's opinion or any unique theory. But I think it is that that's a takeaway for me. Yeah, the pros they're talking about it because I think so many times after a lesson, for people call it the Miller Lite lesson, is that the great teachers, the great coaches, they're always thinking just like a match. How do you get better? How did that practice go? How can I help that player out? And
Yes.
You're up in the morning and you're showering and you're going to work and go, I got to help this kid with their forehand, or they help this player with that shot.
Yeah, and the same thing if you're walking out. We have a Sunday workshop that we do, which is 4 courts, club players, all levels, and as we're walking out, my wife and I, Kelly doesn't teach anymore, but we would walk out, and it would be, oh, that was a good one. That one wasn't so good. That drill didn't work. That drill, but that's what you do if you're into it. If you're professional.
Yeah. Here's something I picked up from you just in talking to you, organizing this podcast. Tell me if I have it right. Someone told you this. I'm own this. I'm going to, when you work in your business, it's difficult, or you cannot work on your business. Why don't you comment on that?
Yeah. I think, now that I've sold my club and, I'm back to being a tennis pro, I think I probably, made a mistake, during the years that I owned it, because I was the owner, I was the director of tennis, and I was on the court a fair amount. So I think I was probably spread too thin, and then COVID hit, and I couldn't be on the court, and I had time to really take the 360-foot view. And I've read that quote. So again, that's another one of my plagiarized quotes. That one, but I think it's a good one. I think if you're working in the business every day, you're involved in the day-to-day stuff. You tend not to have the long-term view of everything. We have a very big facility. We had a big outdoor area, 13 courts outside that really sat there unused for 8 months out of the year. And we were always trying to find something to do with that. We were talking to different people about that, but that would get waylaid because I would be busy, on the court or, dealing with other club stuff. So that's really that's something that I learned, that, when you're a business owner and you're there every day working in it, you have to be very, were I to do this again, I would make which I won't. You need to really make a conscious effort to work on the business.
With your book, I wrote down, first of all, why don't you just touch upon the 2 other books? Tell us the title of the 2 other books, the first 2 books.
The first one was called Tennis Beyond Big Shots. And it's a similar kind of thing. It's that, as we were going through, this is years ago, as we were trying to decide on what to call the books, and I'm going back and forth with the publisher about, what I think, how I think tennis should be played. And we're going back and forth. And he said to me, so what you're saying is really, people should be trying to do less out there, which is just another way of simplifying. And I said, yes, that's 100%. That's what we call it tennis. The point being, there's more to tennis beyond just coming to the court and trying to hit the cover off the ball, which is something that, I see a lot in my world for sure. And then we did a second book that was called, Doubles Beyond Big Shots, which is the whole idea is that there's more to tennis than just trying to hit big shots.
No, that's great. I wrote down 34 names, and there's only 2 of the people that I had never heard of. Let me hand the book over to Yvonne. 38. Why don't you tell us, read the quote on 38, Yvonne, and tell us about that gentleman.
All right. 38. The problem is not a lack of time, but rather a waste of time. There is always sufficient time to prepare for the next shot if you start early enough. Ideally, your racket should be ready to swing forward when the ball bounces. If you're still working on your backswing after the ball bounces, you are in big trouble. Edgar Geffing?
Geffenig, yeah. He's he actually did a thing at my club a couple of years ago. He's a national coach, or was a national coach for, I don't remember, Steve. It maybe, I don't want to say Spain, but he was a national coach. And yeah, I think that's a great quote. And I saw another one along those lines that reminded me of it. It said, if your racket's prepared and your body's prepared by the time the ball bounces, you're in control of the shot. If it's not, then the ball's in control of the shot. And that gets back to what I said, quite a while ago. Preparation is everything.
Yeah, footwork is first. Footwork is before the racket work. I love the expression. It's a race to the bounce. You want to get set like Jimmy Connors. Medvedev is the guy that he just chases everything down. David Ferrer, they called him Perro, the dog. You got to run and run some more. With how about page 140, Yvonne?
140. While adversity is inevitable, negative thinking is optional. Tom Veneziano, I believe.
Who is it?
Tom Veneziano.
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 Yeah, I mean that's well, you guys are putting me on the spot here. I wish you'd told me you were going to do this. I would have studied a little bit. Yeah, I mean that's obviously right. It's how you choose to deal with with what comes at you. That's kind of I got into meditation many years ago, and it's really a life changing kind of thing because you've all heard the term monkey mind, right? Everybody's mind is all over the place, bouncing off the wall. And that's a big thing, certainly in the world of teaching tennis. I think I mentioned that in the book. That one of the reasons I felt the need to write the book is I think there's too much information out there that's not helpful to people, but also people's attention spans have decreased dramatically. I don't remember what the statistic was, but it was something like in 2015, the average attention span was 12 seconds, and now it's 8, and a goldfish's is 9. So you've got people, you've got all this ridiculous information coming at people that have very short attention spans, and then they're supposed to be able to produce good tennis. So I think the quote I said in the book is, quite honestly, they haven't got a chance. And that's why I felt the need, to write the book. So the point of that particular quote is, and the meditation thing is when one meditates, you kind of tend to think that all the thoughts are going to go away, that your mind's going to slow and calm down. And it's not what happens. I mean, when you're meditating, you still have that monkey mind, but you kind of have a decision of which thoughts you choose to engage in. And that's a good way to put it. And somebody once said, well, what does it do for you? And it gives me the ability, or it helps me to respond as opposed to react. And I think that kind of ties well in with Tom's quote, right? When you're playing tennis, you're going to have all these negative things that come up during the course of a match, and it's how you choose to respond to them that's going to determine success or failure.
Yeah, I think the mind is like a drunken monkey, or it's like a bug on a pond. This is one. There's quotes, there's testimonials. You reference so many people in the book. This is a question more about the USTA. Kirk Anderson, the USTA Director of Coaching Education, testimony on the cover of the book. Greg Moran is the best coach of recreational tennis in the country. That's a great comment. With Kirk Anderson, I don't know Kirk that well. I remember when Kirk was a rep for Penn, and I was in Boca, and remember I was doing many things off the court at that particular time when we first started. But he was watching Dave Anderson teach tennis, and he was expressing how he really wanted to get into coaching. Tell us about recreational tennis with the competitive. Kirk is in charge of that, correct?
Well, first, it cost me a lot of money to get Kirk to give me that quote, just so you know. No, I'm totally kidding. No, he's retired. He's retired.
Oh, okay.
And he was, he retired recently, and he's out in Colorado, I believe. But yeah, he was, I don't remember the title exactly, but the head of, education. So he would come and he was pretty big with the 10 and under tennis, the quick start.
But there was divide is a pretty strong word, but it was two separate departments. I mean, to me, it spent so much time at Lake Nona that, I don't really think that the touring pro should have had privacy. Like, let Joe Public watch the pros practice. But with your club, though, with recreational tennis, I mean, with the USTA and the leagues, and that must certainly over the years been a big part of your business, right?
The USTA leagues, yes, are huge. We have 40-something USTA teams. Whoa. And then every now and then the USTA would do one of their initiatives, the welcome centers or the this or the that. And I think it kind of got people excited a little bit. I'm not sure it did, a whole lot for tennis, but USTA teams are huge, huge, great in that they're getting people playing, and also great from a business standpoint.
And how many seasons are there with league
Well,
tennis
that's a good
typically?
question, Steve. That's a good question. I honestly don't even know that. I mean, because one starts and it goes into the next. I mean, there are at least 3, maybe 4.
That makes it more challenging. Then also too, as someone, all the peer pressure as you tell someone, well, why don't you take the summer off, or maybe take the winter off, work on your game.
Yeah.
Because people don't want to lose their spot on the team, correct?
Correct. And they don't want to lose their rating. Yeah, no, I say that all the time. When does the next season start? When does well, this is great. This is a great time to work on, developing your making your forehand better, developing a topspin serve. You're 100% right with that, because they don't want to lose their rating. It's all about, I'm sure with the juniors like the UTR, it's all about the rating. Which is pretty subjective, quite honestly, because I think there are a lot of 4.0 level players that aren't 4.0 level players, but that's big in the U.S. That's very big for sure.
Four seasons in Connecticut, your club. The physical plant is 21 courts, correct?
It's 11 indoors and 13 outdoor. A while back, we rented 2 indoor courts to first a volleyball academy, and then they left a couple of years ago, and now we've rented space to a soccer academy. So now we have 9 indoor courts and 13 outdoor courts.
Wow, that's huge. What about the surface or surfaces?
Hard true. All hard true.
Even indoors?
Yes.
And
yeah.
I mean, obviously we pretty much deal with forehands and backhands, but we've had a wide variety of people on our podcast. But being a club owner, how about the maintenance of clay indoors? Is that a nightmare?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's a nightmare. It's expensive. You have to deal with the hard true coming up into the lobby. It gets into the computers. It's and it's unfortunate because indoor hard true, it's not like outdoor hard true, but people have the perception it's softer, it's easier on the body, and we did think about changing the surface to I don't like to say a hard court because that's got a bad connotation. We would say smooth surface, and there's so many good surfaces out there, as I'm sure you guys know, that are cushiony. They're much easier on the body. But people just have this perception of hard true being softer. But yes, it's quite a challenge.
There's a club I spent a lot of time at in Berlin, Germany. Beautiful place, and actually it worked years and years ago with the chief owner when he was a junior, and one of our longtime associates, Mark Hamlin, is there, and they have no clay. I mean, in Europe, that's really, to me, unheard of. I mean, you go to Europe to be on red clay. How about other products? Have you looked into that with, there's these maverick companies, new companies that, they're rubberized. It's not hard true, but it plays like clay. Do you have any comments, feedback on that?
No, I mean, we haven't looked at it in depth just because we think that it would be it would scare people off. I mean, as I said, we sold the club, and I would suggest to the new owner that he perhaps pursue it. I think you can do it, and you just have to kind of ease people into it. So maybe you do a few courts at first. I mean, it'd be wonderful to have both. If I'm working with a group of ladies and they've got a USTA match, on Thursday on a quote unquote hard court, it'd be great to be able to run that class on the hard courts at our place. And then with that surface, you could also do other things if you needed to, or if you wanted to, you could do pickleball easier if you were inclined to do that. But no, it's really the perception is very ingrained that hard true is better, softer, and so we stuck with that.
This is, I think, very common when someone sells a business that you and your wife are staying on to run it for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I am. We have 3 grandchildren. That in the last 4 years, we've had 3 grandchildren, and they're very. Everybody lives very close, so we get to see them a lot. Are very involved with them. Kelly stopped teaching a few years ago, and she works. She does a lot of things in the back office, but she'll, as time goes on, she'll start to kind of ease out a little bit. I'm going to stay and continue to run the programs, but I also want to start to transition to to doing more teaching, doing more writing, doing more talking to people like you guys, because it's always fun to talk tennis. And in a couple of years, I'll just shift right to teaching. Because at my age, the clock is ticking. With those 93 million balls, that tally's only rising.
I always tell people you have 4 laps if you're lucky, if you could live to be the age to 80. And I heard Steve Campbell, who's the tennis director here at Wintergreen, the resort in Virginia, is that if you think of your lifespan as the length of a tennis court, which is 78 feet. A little bit morbid to think that way, but I'm getting pretty close to that far baseline. I think what should happen is someone like yourself should be in a position where you're giving back and you're teaching, you're teaching people who are in the business that you've been in. And that people like yourself, people that are in the club business should seek out and hear your experience. Hopefully, that's what we're trying to do with our efforts with free educational content, is to improve the industry.
What you guys have out there is, I've learned more. I found you guys from Ed White, quite honestly, during COVID. And, I can honestly say I've learned more about tennis in the last, 5 or 6 years from all the things that you guys have done than in the previous, So my next goal is to get through that 25-hour course. And then maybe you'll let me come down there and watch you guys do your thing.
Yeah, no, maybe we could come up and do something at your club as well.
That'd be great.
It's just a matter of sharing ideas. Let's go with some of these other names, and it's not really for you to reflect exactly what you have in your book. Here's, for example, the Aussie, Emma Doyle. I've never met Emma Doyle, but she, what great spirit and enthusiasm, an Aussie. But Yvonne, why don't you call a number out 1 through 34? Greg, let's just do this. Years ago, and people who listen to our podcast know, we had a 2-year program to study tennis, the craft of tennis teaching. I looked through this. Brent Abel, I only know him via the internet. Obviously, Bill Tilden. I don't personally know Bill Tilden or had any interactions with Bill. I do think that people should read his book, Match Play and Spin of the Ball. But the only reason I want to just do this for a second is, or a few minutes, it just, I think it's just an appreciation of your depth, your connection to tennis. And I think that's where people need to study tennis. And it's really the young people coming up. Many times a gripe is they're not even watching tennis. We've already talked about some of these, but just give me a number, Yvonne, 1 through 34.
22.
22. With I can read my own writing. Jeff Greenwald. I listened to him on a podcast the other day. Jonathan Stokey. What comes to your mind with Jeff?
I know him very well. He grew up in my area. He's great. His story is fantastic. He was a good junior player. Played the tour a little bit. I know he retired. Wasn't happy with how he was doing. Then he went on to become a sports psychologist and came back. And I believe he became number 1 in the world in the 35.
Oh, that's true. I've met him. I don't know him. I've read his book. I haven't really been on his website. I've had audio cassettes. Mark Bay, who was a guest, he called me up one time, and that's when I knew I was old. He called me up and said, "Can you help me out?" Jim Lair was supposed to come in and be his moderator, and Jim couldn't make it. And he said, "I need an old coach." And I said, "Great. I guess I qualify for being old." And then they had, he did it for several years, but Jeff was there. And then I had like the last 7 minutes. So it was a round table or a session talking about the return of serve, for example. And I had my pad of paper and I just went boom, 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 boom. And it was, we come from the corner where we have some facts. But Jeff was there, and I remember it because the way Doug Cash is, he came up to my kid and said, "What are you ranked?" And he said, "What are you ranked in Florida?" And he said 2. So that was a pretty good answer. And so Jeff has this, he has a headset on and where he's going to hit balls and play a set. And he's going to play against my son, Connor. And I'm coaching Connor over in the corner. So he's doing his intro and it doesn't start right away. And I said, Connor, well, this is going to work. He's going to maybe miss a serve and then he's going to talk to the audience. It's not going to be a straight up match. My recollection of that is Connor might have been 15, 16, but obviously both are good tennis players. And I remember Connor, he lost to him and it was a very close set. Maybe it was 7-5, 7-6. They're playing no ad. It was a good number of people watching. And I just remember my son Connor was so frustrated because it wasn't just a set match. It was playing a point, talking about it. And he's over there waiting. He's a teenager. Give us another one.
Let's go with 15.
15.
Well, Steve, can I one more Jeff Greenwald story if you don't mind?
No, go for it.
So I invited Jeff to come. I would invite, big time, pros to come and do special events at the club. And we had Matt Wielander. I think you've mentioned him a couple of times when he was doing his Wielander on Wheels.
Yeah.
Tour. Did you ever see that? Have you ever seen that?
I have seen it in a parking lot, but I know that some of the coaches I've trained, I have not. In fact, he's number 15, ironically, but but go ahead with Jeff. So Jeff was the guest pro one summer, and he came and we're in the classroom, and he's got the whiteboard and he's doing his thing, and I've got a bunch of high level players there, and I can just tell by the looks on their faces, they're rolling the eyes. This is a waste of time, et cetera, et cetera. So we get out on the court, and he was doing a lot of things on rituals, in between serves, and walk back to the fence, look at your strings, all that good stuff, and I could tell the guys were just we're too good for this, et cetera, et cetera. So 3 days later, I get a call from the strongest player there. And he said, Greg, I was playing a match and I was getting killed. And I said, I had nothing to lose. So I started trying some of Jeff's rituals. All of a sudden I came back. You got to give me his phone number. I got to call the guy. So it was a great story. No, that's great. We should have another podcast and do this. I just know this is going to go well so Ivan mentions Matt Wielander, 15. He was based in Connecticut for a while before. Now he's in Idaho, right?
Yes. He actually, I don't remember who connected me with him. He was nice enough to write a great blurb for my first book, and then he started the Wielander on Wheels. And I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, but it's the tennis fantasy experience. Instead of going to a tennis fantasy camp, they bring the fantasy to you. So he was working with a guy named Cameron Lickle, who was a super guy, and they would travel the country in this huge, massive Winnebago, and they would come and they would park the Winnebago at the club, and they would do these very small group clinics, so no more than 8 players, which was great. So you got so Cameron would be covering one court, Matt would be covering the other, and they did a great job of moving in and out, so everybody got their time with Matt. And it was great. And I had him back. He came back 3 or 4 times. And every year when I would introduce him, I would say that, this is Matt's 4th year. We've invited a lot of other pros, and Matt is the only one we've invited back. And he asked me, he pulled me aside and he said, well, what is it that we do that you like? And I said, well, number one, you say the same thing that we do. And he goes, percentage tennis, right? And I said, yeah. He goes, of course. And I said, plus you can tell you really love to teach. He was a great teacher. You really love to be on the court. And he was very funny. He looked at me and he goes, well, Greg, what the hell am I going to do? But he just, he loved being out there. He was wonderful. He was great.
One thing with Wielander, talk about great base. Are you a great baser? We don't really like that. It's just, how can you argue with not having a great base in any endeavor that you pursue? But I believe it was 82 where he won the French, but when he won 3 out of the 4 majors in 88, he had really added to his game where he could go forward. He's playing a one-handed backhand approach shot. He was so solid. Maybe this is not a story for the podcast, but I'll go for it. But I've spent a lot of time in Växjö, where he's from in Sweden. And, young guy starts to make quite a bit of money. And I believe the amount was $50,000, which back in the day, that was a lot of money for maybe 5 years in a row, 4 years, whatever it was. But not solicited, not asked. He said, "Hey, here's $50,000 to improve your program." And then 1 year went by, or the year went by, or close to it, and people called him up, said, "Where's the $50,000?" And out of principle, I don't know if this has changed, but out of principle, he never went back to the club. And
Really?
and that's why people like that are winners. People need to know those stories. So come on, the guy gave you 50 grand, 5 years in a row, no strings attached, you open up an envelope and there's a check in it. And, but they knocked on the door and said, where's the check? They just thought it was going to be an annual thing.
I had several, he was the best. I had several other, big name guys come. I won't mention their names, but the first one came, and I would always meet with them before, because I wanted to know, what's the format? What are we going to do? And I kind of wanted to make sure they weren't going to be saying anything, polar opposite to what we were saying. So I sat down with this one guy, big time, coach. And he said, well, we're going to do a little bit of this, we're going to do a little of that, and, blah, blah, blah. And I said, so we're basically going to go out there and you're going to wing it? And he said, no, we're going to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So, okay. So we get out on the court, and, 20 minutes into it, he comes up to me and he said, really annoyed me. He said, well, what do you think we should do next? And I said, well, I know what I would do next. If they get what I do every week, you're here to, what are you going to do? So then he did whatever he did, and he didn't come back. The next year I had another big time guy, Grand Slam champion. And we have the same meeting, and we go through the whole route, same thing. Well, we're going to do some of this, we're going to do some of that. And we get on the court, and 20 minutes later, he comes over to me, and I was ready this time. He said, what do you think we should do next? And I said, well, why don't we do this? And then he goes, okay, that'll burn some time. Neither of those comments were particularly, nice to hear from these guys who I brought in to as an added value to my players. And that's why Vilander was so great. He was just so engaging, so interested, stayed forever, told stories, signed pictures. He was great.
No, actually, Mark Hamill, I mentioned Berlin. He's had Vilander many times. Just loves how he handled it. Pernfors, as I have been told, is just excellent at that as well. The two Gullicksons years ago, the late Tim and Tom to this day, I believe he's retired as well. But I've been with some people that won some Grand Slam titles, and it's a pretty strong word, but that's not their forte. They're clueless, like what to do as far as group dynamics. I one time had Tim Mayotte. He was knocking on the door to win Wimbledon. He was, I believe, top 5 in the world, and it was at a big indoor club, Tennis Corporation of America. So this is very quickly, but for all the listeners, so you give everybody a name tag when they come in, and on the name tag you give the court number. And so they're all in the bleachers, and you introduce the pro, and the pro tells a few stories. So then the big thing is, how do you get them off the bleachers? How do you get them on a court? And say, just look at your name tag. And if your name tag says 7, that means you're going to court 7. And we had a big air horn, and we had it worked out where the rotations are going to be, just a 5-minute rotation, or, jog to your court, 7-minute rotation, whatever. And because I said to Timmy, I said, you want to follow my lead, or should I follow your lead? He said, I'll follow your lead. And so I said, how I see this is, you're going to be on the center court. You're never going to leave the center court. Everybody's going to hit balls with you. I'm going to stay right here in the center court and make sure it works, because everybody's going to also get their picture taken with you. And I got a photographer. And so everybody hits balls with Tim Mayotte, and, then you bring them all back in at the end. And what I think the best thing that those top players can do, and we don't really get that through TV, is they can share stories. And,
right.
That, because, when you just get a sound bite, we do beat up on commentators for lacking tennis math and not knowing enough about the science of tennis. But at the same time, it's the storytelling. But no, we could do this forever with, sometimes I'll say this is that, I'm not going to mention anybody's name, and then I'll just go, Jeff Jones or whatever. But give me another number, Ivan.
2.
Number 2, Jorge. He's mentioned in your book, Jorge Capistrani.
Yes.
What comes to your mind?
Super guy, super pro. Are you familiar with his tennisdrills.tv website?
Well, back in the 80s, back with VHS tapes, I think that's his forte. I mean, I've met him several times. I don't know him. You know how you meet someone. But yeah, drills and more drills. But way back in
Well,
the 80s on a VHS tape, he had, I mean, you could just see all these drills so fast. And we used his drills back in the 80s, training people at Tyler Junior College.
yeah,
But he
yeah.
was just drills at that time.
Yeah, no, his website is an incredible resource. I mean, the drills are great. You can print the drills out if you want to take them to the court. He's expanded that out to he's got courses, industry courses. I actually went to visit him last year, and I filmed a doubles course for him, doubles, teaching doubles to the recreational player, and super nice guy. Yeah, no, his website is just, all my pros have access to it, and it's an incredible resource for pros, both drills, but also, industry, career stuff as well. Like I was talking about, earlier, trying to help people along with their career. He's got a tremendous amount of great material on there.
Yeah, Chuck Gill. I never worked with Chuck. We were at the same company. I did do some corporate outings when he was at the Boca Hotel, and I remember he told me that Jorge Corpusrani is the most complete pro within the USPTA as far as. So that's a very nice compliment. It's like the one Kirk Anderson has on the cover of your book.
Yeah.
I do know that he's at Hope College, which is right next to Ferris State, and that just a guess would be, well, gee, why would we only have so few people, so few programs that are, teaching tennis teachers, and is one cannibalizing the other? It's like, come on, let's, why isn't there just one in Michigan and one in Connecticut and one in Colorado?
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, as well as I do, it's tough to get people to come, to come into the industry. I'm right now I have an older pro staff. I'm 64. My top, our top pros are all, 50 plus. And, the kids, as the kids like the young kids, and I'm struggling to find some younger pros. And I have no women on our pro staff really full time. At one point we had 4, great women pros. And now I have, one girl who's a school teacher and teaches part time. So that's a challenge for sure.
I think one thing with drills, though, is not a negative comment, but I always, in talking about computer games, is that first you have to have the will to get the skill, and then drill before you have the thrill. But the computer game, to me, having never played computer games, it just seems like there's a thrill to it. I do know now that, they're even having competitions for, people, whatever it's called, computer games. But no, it's very, very important to have a wide variety of drills. And, we talk about building a drill, creating a drill of the day. I do think at tennis teaching conferences, and certainly people are finding out that you and I are tennis junkies, that I've been to so many tennis teaching conferences, but I think pros have always been more open. Hey, that's a great drill, but they're not so open to just learning about fundamentals.
I think when you get to a, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think when you get to a certain age, right? I mean, we all know tennis pros. Well, I think everybody, right, has an ego, and the standard tennis pro ego can be pretty strong. I had a pro at my club who was just, a phenomenal player, phenomenal teacher, and we all have our egos, but this guy's ego was just off the charts, and he generated a lot of money, tremendous amount of money for the club. And he was just doing some things that just were destroying kind of the culture of the pro staff. And I gave him, we had so many meetings, and he was just doing things that were just, just ridiculous, that were just unnecessary and just ego driven. And it got to the point where several meetings, look, please, you need to stop doing this. Yes, of course, I'll stop doing this. 3 months later, nothing had changed. Look, I've asked you, now I'm telling you. Oh, yes, of course, I'll change. Nothing changed. And finally I said, listen, I don't want to have to let you go, but this is it. I will. Yes, of course, I'm going to change. And 3 months down the road, nothing changed. And I had to let the guy go. And I got hate email from the members, because, not the members, some of the members, because they just loved taking lessons with him, but they had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. And it wasn't their job to. But, I had to worry about the culture of the pro staff. And the unfortunate thing is the guy was incredibly talented, but he's been fired from every job since. which is sad.
With let me go. That's sad. It is sad. Let me go with two more. We'll have to have another podcast. This could be fun. Just taking these names, stories within stories. Give me a number, sir.
30.
Eddie Crass.
I think you know Ed better than I do, but Ed and we connected last year because, as I said, I wanted to bring, I like to bring events to the club. And I thought I have a group of guys who are legitimately, I probably got, I want to say 20 to 30 guys who are 5.0 level plus. And it's challenging to find activities for them. So they tend to kind of go off on their own. What they've done, they were in part of our men's singles league, but we're just much, much too strong. So they form their own league, and they take 6 courts every Monday and every Thursday night from 8 to 10, and they run their own little league, which is great because that's traditionally quiet time. So I brought in Ed to do the one-on-one doubles because I thought they would love this. This is right up their alley, and you guys, I'm sure you know what that is: half court, must serve and volley, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how we met. And then what I did is I had Ed come first, and he did a doubles clinic for everybody, and I assisted him, and he was wonderful. I mean, the personality is great, the passion is great. He's got his college, I'm not sure what is it called, college exhibition camps that he does. He's a true passionate tennis guy for sure.
Eddie Crass, you spent some time in your part of the world. He was at Harvard as a coach. I spent years. It was 15 years in Tampa. So yeah, I know Eddie Crass well. He loves hockey. He loves, I guess it's the blues, jazz, the blues.
Yeah,
he knows how to do those 12-ounce curls, those low to highs.
Absolutely.
Low to high swallow through.
Yep.
I think every tennis court should be like a gym. Here at the resort indoors, we have pickleball lines down, but there's no 10 and under lines. I think that every court should have both. But I think another line that should be on the court, like you're on a basketball court. Braden used to say, doesn't matter. If it's a basketball player, volleyball player, badminton player, they know what the boundaries are. Because, like say, for example, when the 10 and under first came out, people complained about having 10 and under lines. But with that, I think every tennis court should have a line down the middle, all the way down the middle. So when you play that one-up or the one-on-one doubles, we call it ghost doubles. At one time, Tommy Haas convinced Ed to let people serve and stay back, but then Ed went back. No, you have to serve and volley. It's just a great drill. I mean, like say at your club, if there's only 3 people and they want to play doubles and they don't have a fourth. I used to tease the Canadians. They used to call 3 players on the court playing doubles, Canadian doubles, because there's only 3 tennis players in Canada. Plus, what they thought the oversized rackets were, they thought they were snowshoes. But now the Canadians are doing a little bit better. But actually, you can have 3 people on the court, just 1 point on, 1 point off, playing ghost doubles. So group dynamics comes into it. Let's just go with one more. I mean, it would be forever if we went through all these.
Let's go with number 19.
John Lloyd.
John Lloyd is a very good friend of Stan, my stepfather, and that's how I first met him. And it is a funny story. I was my uncle lives down in Florida, and he's a big tennis player. And we were playing tennis at Donald Trump's club, Mar-a-Lago. And they had very wonderful old red clay courts. Steve, you remember back in the day we had all those red clay courts? Yeah. So I was out hitting tennis balls with my uncle, and John Lloyd, he actually was teaching down there. And what John's job was, he was selling high-end real estate down in Palm Beach, in very big houses. And he would bring the customers to the court and just kind of hit some balls with them, and then he would, take them to show them the houses. That was part of the procedure. And as John Lloyd walked by, he walked past my uncle's court. My uncle, grabbed him because he knew him, and he introduced me to him. And he said, "This is Stanley Matthews' stepson." And so we were talking a little bit, and then he was watching me hit balls, and I was hitting my slice backhand, which is all I have. And then John Lloyd said, "Oh, I remember that. That's the Stanley Matthews slice backhand." And I said, "Yeah, but unfortunately, I also have his forehand with the continental grip." So that's my John Lloyd story. Super nice guy, and he wrote a little thing for my book for me. So super nice guy.
I don't know him. I read his book. One thing comes to my mind is one of our students, Raven Clausen, talking about stories. He played world team tennis, and then maybe John was the assistant coach or the head coach, but he said that I could just listen to his stories all day long. But I was at Holiday Park, which is now rightfully so. It's called Jimmy Everett, Jimmy Everett Tennis Center. And Chrissy was married to John Lloyd at one time. And, he was a top 20 player in the world. And, he's so popular among the people from his era. So they had, on the clay courts, they had drawn a line. It was, say, like 2 feet in from the sideline. So the court's very narrow. And he couldn't come to the net. And they were serving underhand. And, Chris Everett could hit the ball really well. She could hit the ball so deep. I guess that goes to Everett, 125 matches in a row. I'll say this over and over again in the podcast, the story of humility. Everett wins the Canadian Open, and she looks at the board of champions and goes, my father won this tournament. She never knew that her father had won the Canadian Open. So you wonder, just like with Wielander being upset on principle, like, hey guys, it doesn't mean I'm going to give you 50 grand for life. But with Chris Everett, humility with her father. But no, it's we could go on forever with these books, or these names. But the reason I thought that would be fun to do is, your history in the game, and then just there's so much depth. And I think if we have any young aspiring tennis coaches listen to our podcast, they need to read. They need to meet people who've been in the game for a long time. Obviously, you and your wife, you added up lots of years in the game, and I don't think that takes place. I think one thing with the internet is maybe you can YouTube how to build a patio, but I don't think you can YouTube how to become a complete tennis pro. With Ivan, you got lots of pearls there. Why don't you just give us a few, or how fast could you go through that? Maybe we could break the 4-hour mark, but go through a few pearls.
Yeah, let me go through them. Enjoyed listening to you guys. Thank you. So, enough rejections to wallpaper a room. Did a great job at warming the bench for 2 years.
4 years.
4 years.
4 years. The older
Don't
the man
sell
gets,
me short.
the older the man gets, the better he was. Behind every successful man, there's a surprised mother-in-law. Strange and wonderful relationship. I was strange and she was wonderful. Longevity versus level. Nervous for a tournament at 82. And the quote, to be 80 again. His serve goes 72, but his grunt goes 104. You only make as much as you save. Never ask what you're going to get paid. You fed over 93 million balls. Among the Haagen-Dazs diet, the exerciser, the socializer, and the student. If you stop teaching, you stop teaching. All wisdom is plagiarized, only stupidity is original. Doubles, down the middle, at their feet, over their head. One-on-one back, superior athletes playing in an inferior system. One up, one back, I mean. The club directory should be the junior development program. Complete, common sense, and clean for your book. You're doing the right things. You just need to do it better. Awkward shots, Cirque du Soleil tennis. We got power evolves as technique improves. Preparation, the ready position and split step. I've yet to understand what reading your wristband has to do with where the ball goes. Racket head speed, go for it. I can do it. Forget racket head speed. You can't do it, and you shouldn't go for it. When you work in your business, it's difficult to work on your business. While adversity is inevitable, negative thinking is optional. A goldfish's attention span is 9 seconds. Ours has gone down to 8. Meditation gives you the ability to respond rather than to react. The mind is like a drunken monkey or a bug on a pond. And the last one I have here is the Vilander story with the 50 grand principle.
Greg, how do our listeners get a hold of you?
They can email me, Steve. My email is GMORAN at the number 4 seasonstennis.com. Or if anybody'd like to give me a call, 203-417-3845. Steve, if anybody'd like, I think I mentioned to you in email, if anybody'd like a copy of my book, I'm happy to give complimentary copies to, whatever, the first 10, 15 people that send me a note. I'll be happy to send them a copy. And if they enjoy it, hopefully they get something out of it. And if they, recommend it to their students, that would be great too.
Oh, that's great. Why don't you give us the email one more time so they can write you?
Yeah, GMORAN at the number 4 seasons, SEANOS.com.
No, this has been great. Thank you. You keep on going. We'll have to do this again. Just the last segment we went through, just to, you could put a list together. I could put a list together. But I think the Mark Twain line is, there's so many of them, but every time you meet someone, you meet your master, right? John Embry, I don't know him very well. We've met him a few times, but I made a special trip down to Lake Nona to meet with him. And we're talking about having a Braden. I asked him about having a Braden course. And I said, I can share 3 to 5 points with you very quickly that I'd be pretty confident that my ability with the English language, a very small number of people out of the 15,000 would be able to answer these Bradenisms, or whether it's at 19.1 degrees or, how the swing is formulated on the serve. I mean, I really think how the swing is formulated on the serve, either you have a direct or indirect background with Braden or you don't know how the swing is formulated on the serve. Myth after myth. But I did also say that, 15,000 members of the USPTA, and I've been a member forever and was a tester years ago, that you can learn from each and every one of them. But that would be a fun exercise, is just all the names that you mentioned in your book, to just, okay, you tell me a story, I'll tell you a story. Because
I frequently tell people, I talk about, Braden a lot. I frequently say, in my opinion, the greatest tennis teacher that ever lived.
Yeah, that's in your book. Most, so well informed, don't tell me what you think, tell me what you know. And so that's one thing we're trying to do. And I appreciate you writing about Vic and honoring Vic and others as well. But I do think tennis teaching, it definitely needs a shot in the arm. And we need to work together to try to improve, and especially with padel and pickleball and some sports that are easier, where it serves the quick fix, the instant gratification. But
Steve, if there's ever anything I can do to help you guys out, I know you're asking for volunteers, and like I said, that's part of what I want to start to do. So if there's ever anything I can do to help you guys out, please don't hesitate to ask.
No, we need to do that. Our strength is our weakness. We continue to teach, and that's where we come from. The same school of thought as yourself is, we haven't put down the ball hopper, but we need to step it up. And for years I've done traveling workshops, but what we need to do with the traveling workshops is, and that's the beauty of the internet, is that information can be shared, but it's just the quality of information that goes out. But no, we need to connect on that as well. But let's follow up on that. And but again, I'd like to thank you and Yvonne, but obviously the listeners. It's been a very, very good session.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Adios, amigos.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Great podcast. Wow. Could talk to him forever about tennis.
Yeah.
Anyway, everyone, thank you very much. Wave goodbye to the camera, Yvonne. Another podcast in the books. Thanks, Greg Moran.
Thank you.